The black SUV growled through the empty Montana highway, like a predator closing in on wounded prey. Inside, 6-year-old Sadie Holloway pressed her small body against the passenger door, her bare feet tucked beneath her torn pink dress. Blood had dried on her soles from running across gravel 2 stops ago, when she'd almost made it to a gas station bathroom before the bad man caught her arm and squeezed until she stopped screaming. That was 47 hours ago, or maybe it was longer. Sadie had lost count of the sunrises. She kept her eyes on the window, watching the Montana landscape blur past. Mountains rose in the distance like sleeping giants, their peaks still dusted with late spring snow. Her grandmother used to tell her stories about those mountains, about the people who lived in their shadows. Tough people, scary-looking people. Scariest-looking folks sometimes got the kindest hearts. Grandma Rose always said, "Don't judge a book by its cover, Sadie Bug. Sometimes the monsters you're running from are wearing suits and smiles. And sometimes the angels have tattoos and ride motorcycles." Sadie didn't understand what that meant back then. She was starting to understand now. The man driving the SUV was named Raymond. He'd told her that on the first day when he'd offered her candy at Riverside Park. He'd seemed so nice. Clean-shaven face, expensive watch, the kind of smile that made grown-ups trust him immediately. "I'm a friend of your daddy's," he'd said. "He asked me to pick you up. There's been an emergency." Sadie had known it was a lie. Her daddy always picked her up himself, even when he was tired from working double shifts at the construction site. Her daddy smelled like sawdust and coffee and the peppermint gum he chewed to quit smoking. This man smelled like medicine and something sweet that made her stomach turn. But before she could run, before she could scream, Raymond had pressed something over her nose and mouth. The world went fuzzy and gray, and when Sadie woke up, she was in this SUV with the seats removed from the back, replaced by a thin mattress and metal rings bolted to the floor. She'd seen the zip ties, the duct tape, the cooler filled with juice boxes and animal crackers, and little white pills that Raymond called sleepy candy. He'd made her take one of those pills on the first day. After that, Sadie had learned to pretend to swallow them, hiding them under her tongue until she could spit them into her hand when he wasn't looking. She needed to stay awake. She needed to remember everything, because Sadie Holloway was not going to disappear. The SUV slowed as they approached a small town. Sadie could see a gas station up ahead, its red and white sign flickering in the afternoon sun. Her heart began to pound. "I need to use the bathroom," she said quietly. Raymond glanced at her in the rearview mirror. His eyes were cold, calculating. Nothing like the warm smile he'd worn at the park. "You went an hour ago." "I have to go again. My tummy hurts." It wasn't entirely a lie. Her stomach had been cramping for days from fear and the stale crackers that were all he let her eat. But mostly Sadie needed him to stop the car. She needed a chance. Raymond sighed and pulled into the gas station. The gravel crunched beneath the tires as they rolled to a stop beside a pump. 2 minutes, he said, unlocking the doors. "And Sadie, if you try to run again, I'll have to give you more sleepy candy, enough to keep you quiet for a very long time. Do you understand?" Sadie nodded, her chin trembling. But inside, something hard and fierce was building in her chest. Something that felt like the opposite of fear. She climbed out of the SUV on shaking legs. The afternoon air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. Sadie breathed it in deeply, filling her lungs with freedom while she still could. Raymond walked her to the bathroom. His hand clamped around her wrist like a vice. He checked inside to make sure there were no windows, no other exits, then pushed her through the door. 2 minutes. The lock clicked behind her. Sadie stood in the cramped bathroom, her heart hammering against her ribs. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. There was a small window near the ceiling, painted shut and covered with grime. Too high for her to reach, even if she could open it. But there was a vent. A metal grate near the floor, partially rusted, just big enough for a small body to squeeze through. Sadie dropped to her knees and pulled at the grate. Her fingers were weak from days of little food and less sleep, but fear gave her strength she didn't know she had. The screws were loose, probably hadn't been tightened in years. The grate came free with a metallic screech that made Sadie freeze, certain Raymond would hear. Nothing happened. She peered into the vent. It was dark and narrow, barely wider than her shoulders. She had no idea where it led. Maybe outside, maybe to another room, maybe to a dead end where she'd be trapped until Raymond found her. But staying here was certain death. Sadie had heard enough of Raymond's phone calls to understand that much. Package acquired, he'd said to someone on the first night. ETA 6 hours, buyer confirmed, full payment on delivery. And later, when he thought she was asleep, this one's perfect. Young, healthy, no medical issues, premium price. Sadie didn't know what premium price meant, but she knew it was bad. She knew that wherever Raymond was taking her, she wouldn't be coming back. She squeezed into the vent. The metal was cold against her skin, rough with rust, that scraped her arms and legs as she crawled. The darkness was absolute, pressing against her eyes like a physical weight. Sadie had always been afraid of the dark. She used to sleep with a nightlight shaped like a unicorn, its soft pink glow keeping the monsters at bay. But the real monsters didn't live in the dark. The real monsters wore expensive polo shirts and drove black SUVs and smiled at little girls in parks. Sadie kept crawling. The vent twisted and turned, narrowing in places until she had to exhale completely to squeeze through. Her dress caught on a jagged edge and tore further, but she didn't stop. She could hear sounds, now muffled voices and the clink of dishes. A kitchen, maybe. A restaurant attached to the gas station. The vent ended at another grate, this one opening into a storage room filled with boxes and cleaning supplies. Sadie pushed against it, and the grate fell outward with a clatter that seemed impossibly loud. She tumbled out onto the concrete floor, gasping, trembling, covered in rust and dust and blood from a dozen small cuts. But she was out. She was free. For now. Sadie scrambled to her feet and looked around wildly. The storage room had one door slightly ajar, leading into what looked like a kitchen. She could hear the sizzle of a grill, the clatter of pots and pans, voices calling out orders. She ran. The kitchen workers barely had time to register the small, dirty girl sprinting through their workspace before she was gone, bursting through a side door into the blinding afternoon sunlight. Behind her, she heard someone shout. Ahead of her, she saw the gas station parking lot, Raymond's black SUV, and beyond it, the open road. Raymond was standing by the bathroom door, his face twisted with confusion that was rapidly turning to rage. He saw her. Their eyes met across the parking lot. Sadie ran faster than she'd ever run in her life. Her bare feet slapped against the gravel, sending jolts of pain through her already injured soles. Blood smeared with each step, leaving a trail that Raymond could follow. But Sadie didn't care about the pain. She didn't care about anything except putting distance between herself and the man who wanted to sell her. Sadie, Raymond's voice was smooth, controlled, pitched to sound concerned rather than angry. Sadie, sweetie, come back. You're confused. I'm trying to help you. She didn't look back. Grandma Rose always said that looking back was how you got caught. You had to keep your eyes forward, fixed on where you were going, not where you'd been. The road stretched out before her, empty and endless. No cars, no people, nothing but asphalt and sky and the distant mountains watching over her like silent guardians. Sadie's lungs burned. Her legs screamed for rest. She was 6 years old and had barely eaten in 2 days, and her body was failing her even as her spirit refused to quit. Behind her, she heard the SUV's engine roar to life. No, 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 no. She veered off the road, plunging into the scrubby brush that lined the highway. The vegetation was sparse, but better than nothing, offering some cover as she stumbled through rocks and weeds and scattered debris. The SUV couldn't follow her here, but Raymond could. She heard a car door slam, footsteps crunching on gravel, the brush rustling as someone pushed through it behind her. Sadie, his voice was closer now, all pretense of warmth gone. You're making this very difficult. The buyers don't like damaged goods, but they'll take what they can get. You don't want to be damaged goods, do you? Sadie kept running. Branches whipped at her face, leaving thin lines of fire across her cheeks. Her pink dress, already torn, caught on a thorny bush and ripped almost in half. She didn't stop. And then she saw it. A building half hidden behind a cluster of trees. Low and weathered, with a gravel parking lot and a sign she couldn't quite read from this distance. But what she could see, what made her heart leap with desperate hope, was the row of motorcycles parked outside. At least a dozen of them, chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun, lined up like sleeping dragons waiting for their riders. Bikers. Grandma Rose's words echoed in her mind. Sometimes the angels have tattoos and ride motorcycles. Sadie didn't know if that was true. She didn't know if the people inside that building would help her or hand her back to Raymond with an apologetic shrug. She didn't know anything except that Raymond was getting closer and her legs were giving out and she had no other choice. She ran toward the door. It was marked with a skull and crossbones. The paint faded but still visible. A warning, a threat. Keep out. Danger ahead. Sadie didn't hesitate. She'd already met the real monsters. Whatever was behind this door couldn't be worse. She burst through the entrance with enough force to crack the wooden frame. The Iron Horse Tavern fell silent. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. 12 men sat scattered around the dim interior, their leather vests adorned with patches and symbols Sadie didn't understand. They were big men, most of them, bearded and tattooed with hard eyes and scarred hands, and the kind of faces that made mothers pull their children closer on sidewalks. Sadie stood in the doorway barefoot and trembling, her torn pink dress hanging off one shoulder, her face streaked with dirt and tears and blood. She couldn't have been more than 40 pounds, soaking wet, a tiny figure against the backdrop of chrome and leather and danger. Behind her, through the still, swinging door, the afternoon sunlight silhouetted a black SUV pulling into the parking lot. Sadie didn't cower. She didn't collapse into hysterics. She'd spent 47 hours being scared, and somewhere along the way, the fear had burned itself out, leaving only something harder and fiercer in its place. She straightened her spine, looked directly at the biggest, scariest man in the room, and spoke in a voice that didn't waver. "The bad man is outside. He took me from Riverside Park 2 days ago. I got away when he stopped for gas. I need help, please." Nobody moved. The big man she'd addressed, a weathered giant with silver-streaked hair and eyes the color of steel, set down his beer glass slowly. His leather vest identified him as the chapter president. A patch on his chest read, "Colt Ironside Brennan." He was 58 years old, though he looked older. The kind of old that comes not from years, but from hard living and harder losses. 20 years ago, his 14-year-old daughter, Meredith, had walked to a friend's house 3 blocks away and never come home. They'd found her body a week later, discarded like garbage in an abandoned warehouse. Colt had spent 2 decades living with that grief, channeling it into the club, into the brotherhood, into a life that felt like penance rather than purpose. He'd seen a lot of things walk through the Iron Horse doors, drunks, cops, rival clubs looking for trouble. But never this. Never a 6-year-old girl with ancient eyes and blood on her feet standing straight as a soldier and asking for help like she expected to receive it. The door opened again. A man walked in mid-40s wearing an expensive polo shirt and pressed khakis. His smile was warm, apologetic, perfectly practiced. Everything about him screamed respectability. Clean-shaven, manicured nails, a Rolex glinting on his wrist. "There she is." He shook his head with theatrical exasperation. "I'm so sorry about this gentleman. My daughter has quite the imagination. We were playing a game and she took it a little too seriously." He stepped towards Sadie. She screamed. It wasn't a child's tantrum scream. It was the sound of pure primal terror. The sound of prey recognizing its predator. The sound that had echoed through the nightmares of every parent in that room. The sound they'd hoped they'd never hear from their own children. Sadie scrambled backward, her bare feet slipping on the wooden floor, and crashed into Colt's legs. Without thinking, she grabbed fistfuls of his jeans and hid behind him, making herself as small as possible. "No, no, 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 no." Her voice was a desperate whisper. "He's not my daddy. He's not my daddy. My daddy's name is Thomas Holloway. He builds houses. He has a scar on his chin from when he fell off his bike when he was little. He smells like sawdust and coffee and peppermint gum. This man is not my daddy. Please, please don't let him take me." The room changed. 12 men in leather vests, most of them veterans of foreign wars, most of them fathers or grandfathers, felt something shift in the air. That protective instinct that lives in the chest of anyone who's ever loved a child. It sparked and caught fire, spreading through the room like wildfire through dry brush. Colt's massive hand came down on Sadie's shoulder. Gentle but firm, a promise without words. "Stay behind me, sweetheart." The man's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes. Calculation, assessment, the quick mental arithmetic of a predator weighing his options. "Sir, I understand this looks concerning, but I assure you this is simply a misunderstanding. My daughter has behavioral issues. Her therapist says she creates these elaborate fantasies when she's upset. I just need to get her home and we can sort all this out. What's your daughter's name? The question came from Bo Thornton, the club's sergeant-at-arms. 6'4", 270 pounds, arms covered in tattoos that told stories of violence and survival. He'd moved to block the front door without anyone noticing. The man's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Sadie, her name is Sadie. Behind Colt, the little girl flinched at the sound of her own name in his mouth. But she didn't stay silent. She couldn't afford to. He's lying. Her voice was small but certain, carrying through the quiet room. He didn't know my name at first. He called me sweetie and honey and darling for the whole first day. He only found out my name when he went through my backpack and found my school folder with my name on it. Tommy Aldridge stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. Former Navy SEAL, 3 tours in Afghanistan, and he'd never seen terror like what lived in this child's eyes. But he'd also never seen courage like what kept her standing, kept her talking, kept her fighting even when everything in her body must have been screaming to collapse. Sweetheart, he said carefully, crouching down to her level while still keeping his body between her and the stranger. What else can you tell us about your real daddy? Things this man wouldn't know. Sadie's grip on Colt's jeans tightened, but her voice remained steady. My daddy's hands are rough from working with wood. This man's hands are soft. My daddy has a crooked pinky finger on his left hand because he broke it playing baseball in high school. My daddy sings "You Are My Sunshine" when he tucks me in at night, but he always gets the words wrong on purpose to make me laugh. My daddy calls me Sadie Bug. This man calls me Sweetie, and it makes my skin crawl. The room went absolutely still. Raymond's mask slipped for just a fraction of a second. Annoyance, frustration, something darker beneath. Then the pleasant smile returned, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. She's very creative, he said. As I mentioned, she has issues. Now if you'll excuse me. He reached for Sadie. Colt's hand shot out and caught his wrist in a grip that made the man gasp. She doesn't want to go with you. You don't understand. Raymond's voice hardened. I have legal custody. I have documentation in my car. This is a family matter and you're interfering with it. Then you won't mind waiting for the police to verify that. Raymond tried to pull his hand back. Colt didn't let go. This is ridiculous. And for the first time, real anger crept into his voice. You're a bunch of criminals. Everyone knows what kind of club this is. You can't hold me here. This is kidnapping. Funny you should use that word. Darlene McAllister stepped out from the backroom phone, already pressed to her ear. Former Army intelligence, the only female member of the chapter, and the smartest person in any room she entered. Her road name was Raven, earned for the dark hair she'd had before it turned silver, and for her habit of collecting information like a bird collecting shiny objects. 911. Yes, I need to report a possible child abduction. We have the child safe at the Iron Horse Tavern on Route 12. The suspect is a white male, mid-40s, driving a black SUV. She squinted through the window at the parking lot. Montana plates, 7-David-Frank-492. Yes, we'll hold him here. Thank you. Raymond's face went pale. For the first time, the confident facade cracked, completely revealing the desperate man beneath. This is a misunderstanding, he said, but his voice had changed. The smoothness was gone, replaced by something tight and panicked. You're making a huge mistake. Do you have any idea who I am? I have lawyers. I have connections. I'll have this place shut down. I'll have all of you arrested for assault, for false imprisonment, for... He bolted. Raymond yanked his wrist free with sudden violence and lunged for the back door, moving faster than anyone expected for a man in pressed khakis. He made it 3 steps. Tommy hit him low, a perfect tackle that drove him into the pool table with a crack of breaking wood. Bo came in from the side, and a third biker named Jimmy Alderton grabbed his arms. Within seconds, Raymond was face down on the floor with 3 large men holding him in place. Get off me, get off, I'll sue every one of you, His wallet fell out of his pocket during the struggle, contents scattering across the floor like secrets spilling into the light. Bo picked it up and started going through it, his face growing darker with each discovery. Richard Thompson. He held up a driver's license. That's funny. This ID says Raymond Schiller. He kept digging. And this one says David Peterson. and this one says Michael Watts. He looked down at the struggling man with disgust that bordered on physical revulsion. How many names you got, friend? But it was what else fell out of the wallet that made everyone go quiet. Zip ties. Heavy duty, the kind you'd use for industrial applications or for binding someone who might struggle. A small roll of duct tape, and a prescription bottle with no label filled with small white pills. Sadie started crying again, burying her face in Colt's leg. But even through her tears, she spoke. He made me take one of those. At the park. He said it was candy. It made me sleepy. And then I was in his car, and I did not know where I was. Colt felt something cold and ancient wake up in his chest. Something he'd felt 20 years ago standing in a hospital morgue looking down at what remained of his daughter. Something he'd spent 2 decades trying to bury. Tommy. His voice was quiet, controlled deadly. Check his vehicle. Tommy was already moving. The SUV wasn't locked. What he found inside made him step back and take several deep breaths before he could report. Colt. His voice was strange hollow. You need to see this. Colt looked down at Sadie. Raven, stay with her. Darlene gathered the child into her arms, murmuring soft reassurances as Colt walked out to the parking lot. The afternoon sun seemed too bright, too cheerful for what he was about to witness. The SUV's back seats had been removed. In their place was a thin mattress stained with things Colt didn't want to identify. Restraints had been bolted to the floor, metal rings designed to hold someone in place during transport. A cooler sat in the corner, filled with juice boxes and animal crackers and more of those unmarked pills. But it was the phone mounted on the dashboard that made Colt's blood run cold. It was open to a messaging app, the screen still illuminated with recent conversations. Colt read them, feeling his hands begin to shake with rage he hadn't felt in 20 years. Package acquired, ETA 6 hours, buyer confirmed, full payment on delivery. And below that, this one's perfect. Young, healthy, no medical issues, premium price. And below that, tell the boss the Montana package is difficult, might need sedation for transport. Sadie Holloway wasn't being kidnapped. She was being sold. Colt stared at the screen, his vision narrowing to a red tunnel of fury. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he heard Meredith's voice. Daddy, help me. The voice he'd heard in nightmares for 2 decades, the voice he'd never been able to answer. But Sadie was still alive. Sadie was still here. And Sadie had been brave enough to run into a bar full of outlaws and ask for help. He walked back into the tavern, each step deliberate, controlled. Raymond Schiller, or whatever his real name was still pinned to the floor, still threatening lawsuits and connections and retribution. His voice had taken on a desperate, wheedling quality. Colt crouched down next to him. Let me tell you what's going to happen. His voice was barely above a whisper, but everyone in the room heard it clearly. The police are coming. When they get here, they're going to find everything in your vehicle. They're going to find your fake IDs in your messages and your buyer contacts. And you're going to spend the rest of your miserable life in a cell, if you're lucky. Schiller's bravado cracked like thin ice over deep water. You don't understand these people. You don't know who you're dealing with. If you let me go, I can disappear. No one has to know. I can give you money. I can... Money, Colt's laugh was cold enough to frost glass. You think we want money? Everyone wants something. Name your price. 50,000, 100. I can get it. Colt stood up slowly, looking down at the man with something that went beyond contempt. Bo, Jimmy, get him into the back room. Make sure he doesn't hurt himself before the cops arrive. We want him healthy enough to answer questions. They dragged Schiller away, his pleading echoing off the walls until the storage room door closed behind him. Colt turned to find Sadie watching him. She'd stopped crying. Her tear-streaked face peeked out from Darlene's protective embrace, those old soul eyes fixed on his. In them, Colt saw something he recognized. The look of a survivor. The look of someone who'd stared into the abyss and refused to blink. Is the bad man going away? She asked. Colt knelt down to her level, his knees protesting the movement. Up close, he could see every cut and bruise, every mark of her 47-hour ordeal. And beneath all of that, the fierce intelligence that had kept her alive. He's never going to hurt you again, Colt said. I promise. Sadie studied his face for a long moment. She'd been lied to before. Adults made promises all the time that they didn't keep. But something in this man's eyes was different. Something old and short and absolutely certain. Promise, promise, she asked. The words hit Colt like a physical blow. Meredith used to say that. When she was small, when she wanted him to be absolutely certain, she'd make him say it twice. Promise, promise, Daddy. Like the words had extra power when you doubled them. He'd promised to keep her safe. He'd promised to always be there. He hadn't kept those promises. Promise, promise, he said, his voice rough. Sadie reached out and touched the leather of his vest, tracing the steel brotherhood patch with one small finger. Her hand was tiny against the worn leather, fragile and strong at the same time. My grandma says bikers are scary. She's not wrong. But you helped me. Colt felt something shift in his chest, something that had been frozen for 20 years, slowly beginning to thaw. Sometimes scary people help, he said, like monsters that fight other monsters. Despite everything, despite the blood on her feet and the terror of the last 2 days, Sadie almost smiled. I like that. Monsters that fight monsters. The sirens were audible now, getting closer. Red and blue lights flickered through the windows, painting the dim interior of the Iron Horse in patriotic colors. Darlene's phone buzzed. She checked it, and her face went complicated. Colt, I ran those plate numbers and the names from his IDs through my contacts. She paused, looking at Sadie, clearly debating how much to say in front of the child. Raven. Colt's voice was quiet. She's earned the right to hear it. Darlene nodded slowly. Raymond Schiller, wanted in 3 states, Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, multiple child abductions over the past 5 years. They've been looking for him for 2 years. Sadie's small hand found Colt's and squeezed. I knew he was bad, she said quietly. I could tell. He smiled too much and his eyes never matched his mouth. Colt squeezed back gently. Sadie, he said, how long were you in that car? The little girl's face crumpled slightly, the first real crack in her remarkable composure. A long time. He stopped a lot. Different houses. I saw other kids sometimes through the windows. They looked scared like me. The room went absolutely silent. Other kids, Tommy's voice was strained. Sadie nodded. He said if I was good, I could play with them. But I never saw the same kids twice. She looked up at Colt with those eyes that held too much knowledge. Where did they go, the other kids? Colt didn't answer. He couldn't, because the answer was a darkness too deep for any child to understand and too heavy for any adult to carry. Darlene was already moving, grabbing the phone from the SUV, scrolling through messages and contacts with urgent precision. Colt, her voice was strange tight. This isn't just one man. What do you mean? I mean this phone has contacts with 12 different numbers, coded conversations, coordinates for 6 different locations across 4 states. This is, she looked up, her face pale beneath its weathered tan. This is a network. The first police cruiser pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing. More sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Colt looked at the back room where Schiller was being held. Looked at Sadie, still trembling, slightly, but standing tall. Looked at his brothers, these men who society wrote off as criminals and thugs who had just helped save a little girl's life. Everyone listen up, he said. When the cops get here, we tell them exactly what happened. Every detail. We cooperate fully. We give them everything they find. And then, Tommy asked. Colt's jaw tightened. And then we have a church meeting. Because if there are other kids out there, his voice caught for just a moment before hardening into steel. We're going to find them. The police came through the door with weapons drawn, shouting commands that echoed off the walls. The next hour was controlled chaos. Statements and evidence and questions that seemed to go in circles. Sheriff's deputies first, then state police, then a woman in a federal windbreaker who introduced herself as FBI agent Catherine Hollister. Sadie was examined by paramedics, gently questioned by a child specialist, wrapped in a shock blanket and given juice. Throughout it all, she refused to let go of Colt's hand. I want to stay with the motorcycle man, she told anyone who tried to separate them. He promised to keep me safe. He promised. Agent Hollister took Colt aside while her colleagues processed the scene. Mr. Brennan, I need you to understand something. Her voice was low, professional, but with an undercurrent of barely contained urgency. The man you apprehended today, the one calling himself Raymond Schiller, he's connected to one of the largest child trafficking operations we've been tracking on the West Coast. We've been trying to locate him for 8 months. Happy to help. I'm serious. She held his gaze. What you found in that vehicle, the messages, the contacts, this could be the break we've been waiting for. You may have saved more children than just Sadie. Colt thought about the messages he'd seen. This one's perfect. Premium price. The casual horror of human trafficking reduced to business terminology. Good. Agent Hollister hesitated, seeming to weigh her next words carefully. There will be questions about how he was subdued, about whether proper procedures were followed, about the bruises on his face. He resisted. We restrained him. End of story. The bruises suggest he fell. Clumsy guy. Hollister stared at him for a long moment. Colt could see the calculations happening behind her eyes. The federal agent weighing regulations against results, procedure against justice. Yeah, she said finally. I imagine he did. She handed him a business card. Plain white federal seal, her name and direct number. If you or your people hear anything else, anything at all, you contact me directly. Not local police. Me. Colt pocketed the card. Sadie's parents arrived at sunset. The moment the old pickup truck screeched into the parking lot, Colt knew this was a different thing than what he'd feared. A woman tumbled out of the passenger seat before the vehicle fully stopped screaming her daughter's name. Sadie, Sadie! The little girl's head snapped up from where she'd been dozing against Colt's shoulder exhaustion, finally catching up with her now that she felt safe. Mommy, Grace Holloway, ran across the parking lot like she was being chased by demons, her face a mask of desperate hope and devastating fear. She was still wearing her nurse's scrubs from her shift at the hospital, the shift she'd walked out of mid-procedure when the police called. Her husband Thomas was right behind her, a big man with calloused hands and sawdust still in his hair, tears streaming down his weathered face. Grace collapsed to her knees and gathered her daughter into her arms. The sounds she made weren't quite words. They were pure raw emotion. The grief and terror of 47 hours transformed into overwhelming relief. My baby, my baby, my baby, my baby. Mommy, I was so scared. Sadie's composure finally cracked the little soldier, becoming a little girl again. But the motorcycle man saved me. He promised, and he didn't let the bad man take me back. Thomas Holloway looked at Colt, really looked at him. The leather vest, the tattoos, the scarred face and hard eyes. Everything about this man should have triggered alarm bells. Everything about him screamed danger. But Thomas didn't see a criminal. He saw the man who had protected his daughter when he couldn't. You saved her. His voice cracked like ice on a spring river. You saved our little girl. Colt shook his head slowly. She saved herself. She ran. She asked for help. She was brave enough to trust strangers who looked like villains. Bravest kid I've ever seen. Thomas's voice broke completely. We thought the police said we thought we'd never see her again. He held out his hand. Colt shook it, feeling the rough calluses of a working man, the strong grip of a father who'd just gotten his world back. I don't know how to thank you, Thomas said. I don't have words. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to repay this. No repayment necessary. Just take your little girl home. Let her be a kid again. Grace finally looked up from where she was still clutching Sadie like she'd never let go again. Her face was destroyed and rebuilt by emotion mascara running, hair disheveled and absolutely beautiful in her relief. Why, she asked. Why did you help her? You don't know us. You had no reason to get involved. Colt thought about the question, thought about all the easy answers he could give, because it was the right thing to do, because anyone would have done the same, because that's just who we are. But Sadie was watching him, her face pressed against her mother's shoulder, those old soul eyes waiting for the truth. I had a daughter once, he heard himself say. The words came from somewhere deep, somewhere he usually kept locked and guarded. She'd be about 34 now. She was taken when she was 14. Grabbed walking home from a friend's house 3 blocks away. Broad daylight. The parking lot went quiet. Even the police officers processing the scene seemed to pause. They found her a week later. He didn't need to say more. Everyone understood what found her meant in that context. I wasn't there to protect her. I've spent the last 20 years living with that. Every kid I help, every predator I stop. He paused, his voice roughening. It doesn't bring Meredith back. Nothing can bring her back. But it means she didn't die for nothing. Her memory protects kids like Sadie. Her ghost stands between children and the monsters who would hurt them. Grace Holloway stood up still holding her daughter and did something Colt never expected. She hugged him. This stranger, this biker, this scary man with the hard eyes and the scarred hands. She wrapped her free arm around him and held on like he was a life raft in a storm. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving our baby. And I'm so sorry about yours." Colt stood rigid for a moment, unprepared for the contact, for the genuine warmth from someone outside his brotherhood. He'd spent 20 years keeping people at arm's length, building walls high enough that no one could see the broken man behind them. Then his arms came up carefully and he hugged her back. Sadie's small hand patted his shoulder. "Don't be sad, Mr. Colt." Her voice was soft but certain. "Your Meredith is in heaven and she's happy you saved me. She told me so." Colt's vision blurred. "She told you?" "Oh." Sadie nodded solemnly. "When I was running to your door, I was so scared. My legs hurt and I couldn't breathe, and I thought the bad man was going to catch me. And then I heard a voice, a girl's voice. She said, 'Go there. They'll help you. My daddy will keep you safe.' So I did." The world stopped making sense for a moment. The parking lot, the flashing lights, the murmur of police radios, all of it faded to static. Colt felt something he hadn't felt in 20 years. Something that might have been hope, or peace, or the first small step toward forgiveness. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. That sounds like something she'd say. The Holloway family stayed for another hour, giving statements, answering questions, holding on to each other like they were afraid to separate for even a moment. Before they finally left, Sadie insisted on saying goodbye to each biker individually. She hugged Tommy, who looked uncomfortable but smiled anyway. She high-fived Bo, her tiny hand disappearing completely in his massive palm. She told a biker named Snake that his tattoos were pretty cool and asked if the snake on his arm was a cobra or a python. She made Darlene promise to come visit her, and when she got to Colt, she looked up at him with those ancient eyes and said something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. "You're my angel now. Did you know that?" "I'm a lot of things, sweetheart. Never been called an angel." "Well, you are, even if you don't have wings." She paused, considering. "Maybe your motorcycle is your wings." Colt laughed despite everything, despite the grief and the rage and the 20 years of darkness. This 6-year-old girl had made him laugh. "Maybe so. Will you come visit me if your motorcycle wings can fly that far?" Colt looked at Grace, who nodded with tears still fresh on her cheeks. "He can come anytime he wants," she said. "Our door is always open to you, to all of you." "Can the motorcycle man come to my birthday party?" Sadie tugged on her mother's sleeve. "I'm going to be 7 in September." "He's invited, any of them who want to come." Thomas Holloway stepped forward and shook Colt's hand one more time. "I meant what I said. If you ever need anything, anything at all, take care of that little girl. That's all the payment I need." They drove away as darkness fell, Sadie waving from the back window until the old pickup truck disappeared around the bend. Colt stood in the parking lot long after they were gone, the other bikers giving him space, understanding that some moments needed to be processed alone. Finally, he turned and walked back into the bar. "Church," he said, "now." They gathered in the back room of the Iron Horse, 12 men around a worn wooden table. The door was closed and locked. This was where they made their serious decisions, away from prying eyes and ears. Colt stood at the head of the table, his massive hands flat against the scarred wood. "What we saw today," he began. "What we found in that vehicle, this isn't over." Darlene had her laptop open, projecting information onto the wall. "I've been digging through Schiller's phone records. 12 contacts in the network. Coded communications going back 18 months. At least 6 locations mentioned as transfer points across Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado." "Transfer points for what?" Jimmy asked, though everyone already knew the answer. "Kids." Darlene's voice was flat professional, but her hands were shaking slightly. "They call them packages. They have a whole terminology. Weight classes, condition ratings, delivery schedules. These people are running this like a business, like they're shipping merchandise." The silence that followed was heavy with fury. "FBI's got the phone now," Tommy said. "Agent Hollister seems solid. They'll handle it." "Will they?" Bo's voice was skeptical. "How long they've been tracking these people? 2 years more. And what have they got to show for it?" They've got jurisdictional issues, Darlene explained. These operations work across state lines specifically because it creates bureaucratic tangles. By the time federal and state and local agencies coordinate, the targets have moved. That's by design. Colt had been quiet thinking. Now he spoke. Sadie said she saw other kids, said they kept moving, never saw the same ones twice, which means they're being moved through the pipeline, Darlene confirmed, handed off from one handler to another. Some end up with domestic buyers. Some, she paused, some get shipped overseas. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. What are we supposed to do? Snake asked. His real name was Harold Whitmore, but no one had called him that in 30 years. We're mechanics and truckers and construction workers. We're not cops. No, Colt agreed. We're not. He walked to the window looking out at the darkening sky. The mountains were black shapes against the purple twilight, silent witnesses to the evil that moved through their valleys. But we know these roads. We know these communities. We see things cops don't see because people don't hide from us the same way. They're scared of us, sure, but they're not performing for us. They're not putting on a show. He turned back to face his brothers. Gwenda Hollister gave me her card, said if we hear anything, contact her directly. I think what she really meant was, you can go places we can't. You can do things we can't. Help us. And if helping means crossing lines, Bo asked quietly. Colt's jaw tightened. Then we decide case by case. But today a 6-year-old girl ran through our door because she thought the scary bikers might be less dangerous than the man chasing her. She was right, and somewhere out there other kids are waiting for someone to care enough to find them. He looked around the table at these men, his brothers, his family, his fellow monsters who fought other monsters. I'm not ordering anyone to do anything. This isn't club business. This is personal. So I'm asking, who's in? Every hand went up. Colt nodded slowly. Then let's get to work. I've got partial data on 3 of the contact numbers. Darlene said, her fingers already flying across the keyboard. Cross-referencing with property records and known associates. Give me 48 hours. I might be able to narrow down at least one of those transfer locations. Do it. Tommy leaned forward. What about Schiller? He's in custody, but he knows things. People, procedures, locations. FBI will interrogate him. But guys like him, they're more afraid of the people above them than they are of prison. He'll lawyer up and clam down. Bo cracked his knuckles. Shame we can't have a conversation with him ourselves. Not worth the exposure. We do this smart, or we don't do it at all. The meeting went on for another hour. Assignments, schedules, communication protocols. By the time they finished, the moon was high and the bar had been closed for hours. One by one, the brothers headed home. Colt was the last to leave. He walked through the empty main room, past the spot where Sadie had crashed into his legs, past the overturned chair from when Schiller tried to run. He stopped at the door and looked back. 20 years ago, in a hospital morgue in Billings, he'd identified his daughter's body. 14 years old forever. She'd been wearing the bracelet he'd given her for her birthday, the one with the tiny silver horse charm, because she'd loved horses more than anything. 20 years of grief and guilt and rage channeled into the club, into the brotherhood, into a life that felt like penance rather than purpose. And today a 6-year-old girl had called him her angel. Your Meredith is in heaven, and she's happy you saved me. She told me so. Colt didn't know if he believed in heaven, didn't know if he believed in anything anymore, except the weight of a promise and the fire of vengeance. But something had shifted today. Something had cracked open in the frozen wasteland of his heart. Maybe Sadie was right. Maybe Meredith had somehow guided her to that door. Or maybe it was coincidence, random chance, a desperate child choosing the nearest shelter from the storm. Either way, it didn't matter. What mattered was that Sadie was safe. What mattered was that somewhere out there, other children were not. What mattered was that Colt finally had something to fight for beyond his own grief. He locked the door behind him and walked to his motorcycle. The night was cool, stars brilliant in the Montana sky, more stars than you could ever see in a city. Somewhere up there, Meredith was watching. He had to believe that now. I'm going to find them, baby girl, he said quietly to the darkness. Every kid that's still out there, still waiting, still hoping someone will come. I'm going to find them, and anyone who gets in my way. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. He kicked the engine to life, the Harley roaring beneath him like a beast awakening from slumber. The sound echoed off the mountains, announcing his presence to anyone who might be listening. Let them hear. Let them know. The monsters were about to learn that there were bigger monsters out there. And these monsters had learned a new purpose from a 6-year-old girl with blood on her feet and steel in her spine. Colt rode into the darkness, the first soldier in a war nobody else knew had started. Behind him, the Iron Horse Tavern sat quiet and empty. But something had changed within those walls tonight. Something had shifted in the fabric of the world, rippling outward in ways that no one could predict. A little girl had run toward the monsters instead of away from them, and in doing so she had awakened something far more dangerous than any trafficking network could imagine. The hunt had begun. 3 days later, Colt's phone rang at 6 in the morning. The sun was barely up, painting the Montana sky in shades of pink and gold, but he'd been awake for hours. Sleep didn't come easy anymore. Too many ghosts crowding around his bed, too many faces of children he couldn't save. We found something. Darlene's voice was tight with exhaustion and something else. Excitement, maybe. Or dread. Get to the clubhouse. Now. He was there in 15 minutes, still pulling on his vest as he walked through the door. Darlene sat hunched over her laptop, dark circles under her eyes, suggesting she hadn't slept since the night of Sadie's rescue. Tommy, Bo, and Snake were already gathered around her, their faces grim. Talk to me. Darlene turned the laptop so everyone could see. I've been running the contact numbers from Schiller's phone through every database I can access. Most are Burner's dead ends, but one number made a mistake. She pulled up a photograph. A woman mid-30s, professional headshot, pleasant smile, kind eyes, the sort of face you'd trust instinctively with your children. Denise Polson runs a nonprofit called Families First Montana. They provide support services for struggling families. Home visits, parenting classes, resource coordination. Sounds legitimate, Tommy said. That's the point. Darlene pulled up another screen, documents and financial records cascading across the display. Families First received a $50,000 donation last year from a shell company called Mountain Vista Holdings. That same company paid rent on a property in Wyoming that matches one of the coordinates from Schiller's phone. Colt stared at the woman's photograph. That trustworthy smile, those kind eyes, the perfect mask for a predator. She's using a charity as a front. Worse than that, she's using it to identify targets. Think about it. She gets invited into vulnerable homes, single mothers, families in crisis, people who can't fight back and won't be believed. She evaluates the kids, identifies the ones who won't be missed or won't be believed, and passes that information up the chain. Bo slammed his fist on the table. She's shopping for them, going door to door like she's selling cookies, but she's actually picking out which kids to steal. And here's the part that made my blood run cold. Darlene's voice hardened, professional detachment cracking under the weight of what she discovered. She's scheduled to speak at a community safety event next week. Topic: protecting your children from predators. The irony was so dark it felt like a physical weight pressing down on the room. Colt's phone buzzed in his pocket. He looked at the screen and his expression shifted. It's Agent Hollister. He stepped away to take the call. When he came back, his jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. Schiller's lawyer got him transferred to a federal facility last night, claimed he was in danger at the county lockup. During transport, there was an accident. Vehicle ran off the road. He's dead, Snake asked. In a coma, massive head trauma. Doctors say he might never wake up. The room went silent. That's convenient, Tommy said quietly. Too convenient. Hollister thinks someone in the network got to him. She's got no proof, but the transport was handled by a private security company with connections to... Let me guess, Darlene interrupted. Mountain Vista Holdings. Got it in one. Bo stood up, pacing the length of the room like a caged animal. So they've got people in law enforcement. People who can make witnesses disappear. And we're supposed to, just hand over information and hope for the best? No. Colt's voice was calm, but his eyes were not. We're supposed to be smart. Hollister's on our side, but she's hamstrung by procedure. Warrants, jurisdiction, chain of custody. We're not. He looked around at his brothers. Raven, I want everything you can find on Denise Paulson. Finances, associates, daily routines. Tommy, reach out to our contacts in Wyoming. See if anyone knows anything about that property Mountain Vista is renting. Bo Snake start talking to people in town. Carefully, anyone who's had dealings with families first. What are you going to do? Darlene asked. Colt picked up his keys, the metal cold against his palm. I'm going to visit the Holloways, see how Sadie's doing, and maybe ask her mother a few questions. The Holloway house was small and tidy, a working-class home on a quiet street in a neighborhood where people still left their doors unlocked during the day. When Colt pulled up on his motorcycle, he saw the curtain twitch in the front window. By the time he reached the porch, the door was already opening. Grace Holloway stood there, looking better than she had 3 days ago, but still fragile around the edges. The kind of fragile that comes from having your worst nightmare almost come true. Behind her, Colt could hear the sound of cartoons playing, the cheerful voices of animated characters filling the house with artificial normalcy. Mr. Brennan? Her voice held surprise, but not fear. I wasn't expecting. Please come in. The living room was warm, filled with family photographs and the comfortable clutter of a home with a young child. Crayon drawings covered the refrigerator in the kitchen. A basket of toys sat in the corner, slightly scattered. Normal. Safe. Everything this family had almost lost forever. Sadie was curled up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket decorated with unicorns, watching a cartoon about talking dogs. When she saw Colt, her whole face lit up. Motorcycle man! She scrambled off the couch and ran to him, wrapping her arms around his legs in a fierce hug. Colt felt something crack in his chest. That protective instinct, that purpose he'd felt when she first grabbed onto him in the bar. Hey, sweetheart, how are you feeling? Better. Mommy won't let me out of her sight, though. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. She even comes in the bathroom with me. That's because your mommy loves you very much. I know. Sadie tugged at his hand. Come see my room. Daddy put extra locks on the window, and he's building me a treehouse in the backyard with a rope ladder I can pull up so no one can get me. Maybe later. Okay, I need to talk to your mom for a few minutes first. Sadie's face fell slightly, then brightened again with the resilience of childhood. Okay, but you have to see my drawings before you go. I drew you. I'd like that. Grace had been watching the exchange with an expression Colt couldn't quite read. Gratitude, certainly, but something else too. Understanding, maybe. Recognition of the bond that trauma creates between survivors. As Sadie bounced back to her cartoons, Grace gestured toward the kitchen. Coffee. Please, Fee. They sat at a small table, mismatched mugs between them. Grace's hands wrapped around hers like she needed the warmth despite the summer heat outside. I wanted to check on Sadie, Colt began. Make sure she's adjusting okay. She has nightmares. Wakes up screaming about being in the car, not being able to get out. But during the day, she seems... Grace shook her head. Kids are resilient, and that's what everyone says. More resilient than us. And you... Grace's laugh was brittle, held together by force of will. I haven't slept more than 2 hours at a time since we got her back. Every sound makes me jump. I keep thinking about all the ways I failed her. You didn't fail her. I let her walk to the park alone, 5 blocks away, broad daylight. She'd done it 100 times. Her voice cracked. I thought she was safe. Colt leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Holloway, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Grace's eyes sharpened, the fragility giving way to something harder. What is it? In the weeks before Sadie was taken, did anyone unusual contact your family? Someone offering services, asking questions, maybe from a charity or government agency? Grace's coffee mug stopped halfway to her lips. Why? Because the man who took Sadie wasn't working alone. We think there's a network, and they might be using legitimate-looking organizations to identify targets. The color drained from Grace's face. Oh, God. What is it? About a month ago, a woman came to our door, said she was from some family services organization. She'd heard we were having financial difficulties. Grace's voice was rising, memory and horror colliding. Thomas's hours got cut at the construction site. We were behind on bills. She wanted to see if we qualified for assistance. Colt's heart rate picked up. What did she look like? Professional, friendly, brown hair, nice smile. She asked a lot of questions about our situation, about Sadie, about our support network. I thought she was being thorough. Did she give you a card? A name? Grace stood abruptly and crossed to a drawer near the phone. She rummaged for a moment, then pulled out a business card. She said to call if we needed anything. Colt took the card. His blood went cold. Denise Paulson, Family Support Coordinator, Families First Montana. This woman, he said, keeping his voice steady. She came inside your home. Yes, she wanted to see Sadie's room. Said it was standard procedure for evaluating need. Grace's voice was rising. Oh God! Oh God, I let her in. I showed her everything. I told her our whole situation, that Thomas was working doubles, that Sadie walked to the park alone sometimes, that we didn't have family nearby to help with childcare. Mrs. Holloway, I gave her everything she needed. I might as well have gift-wrapped my daughter. Grace, look at me. Grace's eyes were wild, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. This is not your fault. These people are professionals. They know how to manipulate. They know how to seem trustworthy. That's the whole point of their operation. But I let her. You were trying to help your family. That's nothing to be ashamed of. The shame belongs to her, and she's going to answer for it. Grace collapsed back into her chair, tears streaming down her face. You found her, this woman. We're working on it, but I need you to tell me everything you remember about that conversation. Every question she asked, everything she said. Can you do that? Grace nodded, wiping her eyes. Yes, I can do that. For the next hour, Colt listened as Grace reconstructed the conversation. Polson had been thorough, asking about Sadie's schedule, her school, her activities. Questions about neighbors and extended family. Questions about Thomas's work hours and Grace's shifts at the hospital. Questions designed to assess exactly how isolated and vulnerable the family was. A perfect target. A premium package. When Colt finally left, he had 3 pages of notes and a cold certainty in his gut. Sadie Holloway wasn't a random victim. She'd been selected, evaluated, chosen, and if they'd done it to her family, they'd done it to others. He stopped at the door and looked back. Sadie had appeared in the kitchen doorway, a piece of paper clutched in her hands. Mr. Colt, I made this for you. She held out the drawing. Colt took it carefully. It showed a group of stick figures on motorcycles, their bikes sprouting wings. Above them, in careful 6-year-old handwriting, were the words, Angels that fight monsters. Angels, he corrected gently. Angels. Sadie shrugged. I know, but I like angles better. Angels are from stories. Angles are math. Math is real. Colt stared at her, this remarkable child who had survived the unsurvivable through sheer force of will. You're something else, Sadie Bug. I know. That's what my daddy says. He knelt down to her level. I have to go now, but I'll be back, and I need you to do something for me. What? Keep being brave. Keep being you. And if you remember anything else about your time in that car, anything at all, you tell your mommy, and she'll tell me. Okay, Sadie nodded solemnly. Okay, promise, promise. Promise, promise. He hugged her one more time, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo and innocence, and walked out into the Montana sunlight. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with a text from Darlene. Found something big. Get back here. Now. Colt kick-started his Harley and roared down the quiet street, the drawing of winged motorcycles tucked safely against his heart. Behind him, Sadie watched from the window, one small hand pressed against the glass. She didn't know what was coming. She couldn't know that her courage, her survival, her refusal to give up had set in motion something that would bring down an empire of monsters. All she knew was that she was safe, and that somewhere out there were other kids who weren't. But the motorcycle angels were coming for them. She could feel it in her bones. 1 week after the rescue, Sadie Holloway sat in an FBI field office conference room, her legs dangling from a chair too big for her small body. The room smelled like old coffee and carpet cleaner, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like trapped insects. Across the table, Agent Catherine Hollister spread photographs and documents in neat rows. Behind her, a one-way mirror reflected Sadie's pale face back at her. She knew people were watching from the other side. She could feel their eyes like heat on her skin. Grace sat beside her daughter, one hand gripping Sadie's so tightly it almost hurt. Thomas stood against the wall, arms crossed, his jaw tight with the effort of staying calm. Neither parent wanted their daughter here. Neither parent wanted to put her through more trauma. But Sadie had insisted, "Mommy, there are other kids still with the bad men. I saw them. If I can help find them, I have to try." Those words spoken in her small, certain voice had ended the argument. Grace had cried. Thomas had punched a wall in the garage where he thought no one could hear. But in the end, they'd agreed, because their daughter was right. Ann and Hollister leaned forward, her voice gentle but focused. "Sadie, I want you to know that you're not in any trouble. Nothing you say here is wrong. We just need you to tell us what you remember. Whatever you remember. Even if it seems small or unimportant." Sadie nodded. Her free hand found the edge of her shirt and twisted the fabric, a nervous habit she'd developed since the abduction. "I remember everything," she said quietly. "I tried really hard to remember, because I knew someone would need to know." Hollister exchanged a glance with the child psychologist seated in the corner, a woman named Dr. Ellen Crawford, who specialized in trauma cases. The doctor gave a small nod. "Proceed." "Let's start with the car," Hollister said. "Can you describe it for me?" "It was black, an SUV. The seats in the back were gone. There was a mattress instead, and metal rings on the floor." "Did you notice anything else? Any smells, sounds, things you could feel?" Sadie closed her eyes, her face scrunching with concentration. "It smelled like medicine, like the stuff the doctor puts on your arm before a shot, and something sweet like fake flowers. The bad man had that smell on him too, on his clothes." She opened her eyes. "And cigarettes, expensive ones, not like the ones my uncle smokes. These smelled different, fancier." Hollister wrote something in her notebook. "What about sounds? Did you hear anything while you were in the car?" His phone rang a lot. He talked to people, different people, I think, because his voice changed. Sometimes he was nice, like when he talked to me at the park. Sometimes he was scared. And sometimes, Sadie's voice dropped, sometimes he was mean, really mean. He talked about packages and schedules and buyers. He said things like the Montana package is difficult and premium price and the usual place. Grace made a small sound of distress. Thomas moved closer, putting his hand on his wife's shoulder. "Did you hear any names?" Hollister asked. "Any places?" Sadie thought hard. "He said Helena once, and something about mountains that sleep, and big metal birds." "Big metal bird." "Airplanes, I saw them through the window when we stopped once. A lot of them lined up in a row, but not at a regular airport. It was smaller, quieter." Hollister's pen stopped moving. "A private airfield," Sadie shrugged. "I don't know what that is, but it was where the big metal birds live. And there were mountains behind it that looked like giants sleeping on their backs." Hollister pulled out a map of Montana and surrounding states. "Sadie, can you show me approximately where you were when you saw the airplanes?" Sadie studied the map with intense concentration. Her finger traced along the highways, stopping and starting as she tried to match the lines on paper with the blurred memories of 2 days in hell. "Here," she said finally, pointing to an area northeast of Helena. "I think the mountains look like this." She traced a shape in the air, a distinctive silhouette that Hollister recognized immediately. The Sleeping Giant Range, a local landmark visible from several small airfields in the region. "That's very helpful, Sadie. What else do you remember about the places you stopped?" "There were houses, different houses. He would leave me in the car, sometimes locked in, while he went inside. I could hear voices through the walls. Other men, and sometimes—" Her voice faltered. "Sometimes I heard crying. Kids crying, but I never saw them." "Oh, he kept me away from the windows when we stopped at those places." "But you said earlier that you saw other kids. When was that?" Sadie's face clouded. "At one house, I had to use the bathroom really bad. He took me inside, and there was a hallway with doors. Most of them were closed, but one was open a little. I saw through the crack." She stopped, her small body beginning to tremble. "There were kids in there, 3 of them, I think, sitting on the floor. They looked at me, and I looked at them, and then the bad man pulled me away and told me to forget what I saw." Grace was crying now, silent tears running down her cheeks. Thomas looked like he wanted to destroy something. "Can you describe the children you saw?" Hollister asked softly. "2 girls and a boy. One girl had red hair and braids. The boy was little, maybe 4. The other girl was older than me. They all looked scared, really scared and tired. like they hadn't slept in a long time. Hollister made more notes. Sadie, you're doing incredibly well. Just a few more questions. Did the bad man ever mention anyone else by name? Anyone he worked with or worked for? Sadie thought hard. He called someone the boss. He was scared of the boss. You could hear it in his voice when he talked to him on the phone. And once when he thought I was asleep, he said something about a woman. A woman. He said the scout did good work on this one. Tell her she'll get her bonus. And then he laughed. The scout, Hollister felt a chill run down her spine. The intelligence they'd gathered from Colt Brennan pointed to Denise Polson as the one who identified targets. Now they had confirmation from the only witness who'd survived long enough to talk. One more thing, Sadie. This is very important. Did you ever hear the bad man give a specific time or date for anything? Anything about when something was supposed to happen? Sadie's brow furrowed. He said 11 packages Thursday night. And I remember because 11 is my lucky number. It's how old my cousin is. And Thursday is when my daddy used to take me for ice cream before. She trailed off. Before this happened. Hollister set down her pen. Sadie, you've been more helpful than you know. The information you've given us could help save other children. You're very brave. Sadie looked up at her with those old soul eyes. I'm not brave. Brave means you're not scared. I was scared the whole time. I'm still scared now. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared, Hollister said gently. Being brave means doing the right thing even when you're terrified. And that's exactly what you did. Sadie considered this. That's what Mr. Colt said. He said I was the bravest kid he ever met. Mr. Brennan is a wise man. He lost his daughter. Did you know that she was taken by bad men too a long time ago? That's why he helps kids now. Because he couldn't help her. Hollister's expression softened. I know. And I think his daughter would be very proud of what he's doing, just like your parents are proud of you. The interview concluded shortly after. Dr. Crawford pronounced Sadie remarkably composed for a child who'd experienced such trauma, though she recommended ongoing therapy and careful monitoring for signs of delayed stress response. Outside the federal building, Colt was waiting on his motorcycle. He'd positioned himself across the street close enough to watch the entrance, but far enough not to crowd the family. When the Holloways emerged, Sadie spotted him immediately. Motorcycle man! She broke free from her mother's grip and ran across the parking lot, launching herself at Colt, with the fearless trust of a child who has decided someone is safe. Colt caught her, swinging her up in his arms. Hey there, Sadie Bug. How'd it go in there? I told them everything I remembered. Agent Hollister said I was helpful. I bet you were. Grace and Thomas approached more slowly. Grace's eyes were red from crying, but her spine was straight, her chin lifted. Thomas looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past week. Thank you for being here, Grace said. She asked if you would be. I think it helped her feel safe. Least I could do. Colt set Sadie down but kept one hand on her shoulder. Listen, I need to talk to you both about something that came up in my own investigation. Thomas's eyes narrowed. What investigation? The club has been looking into the network that took Sadie. We found some things the FBI doesn't know yet. He glanced down at Sadie, then back at her parents. Not here, not in front of her. Grace nodded. Come to the house tonight, after she's in bed. We need to hear this. That evening, after Sadie had been tucked in with her new nightlight and her stuffed elephant and her father's off-key rendition of You Are My Sunshine, the adults gathered in the Holloway kitchen. Colt spread the documents Darlene had compiled across the table. This is Denise Polson. She runs a charity called Families First Montana. Grace's face went white. That's her. That's the woman who came to our house. I know, we've confirmed she's the network's scout. She identifies vulnerable families, evaluates the children, and passes that information to the handlers. Thomas's hands curled into fists. She sat in my house. She drank my wife's coffee. She looked at my daughter like she was sizing up livestock. That's exactly what she was doing. Colt pulled out another sheet. In the past 3 years, Polson has visited over 200 families through her charity work. Of those families, 17 have had children go missing within 6 months of all of her visit. Grace's hand flew to her mouth. 17? That we know of. There could be more. Kids who were classified as runaways, custody disputes cases that never got properly investigated. Thomas stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Where is she? This woman. Where is she right now? Still operating, still doing home visits. She has no idea we're on to her. Then let's go. Right now, let's end this. Colt shook his head. It's not that simple. Polson is just one piece. The network has people everywhere. Law enforcement, social services, maybe even the FBI. If we move too fast, they'll scatter. The kids they're holding will disappear. We'll never find them. So what do? Sit here and wait while more children get taken. We build a case, we gather evidence, and when we strike, we take down the whole thing. Not just Polson, the boss she reports to, the buyers, the transporters, everyone. Grace looked at the photographs spread across her kitchen table. Polson's smiling face, the Mountain Vista Holdings documents, the list of missing children. What can we do to help? Colt hesitated. There's something. But I need to warn you, it might put your family at risk. We're already at risk, Thomas said. The moment that woman walked through our door, we were at risk. Tell us. Polson has a community event coming up. She's speaking about child safety at the Riverside Community Center. The irony was bitter enough to taste. We're planning to expose her there, publicly, force her into the open where she can't hide behind her charity's reputation. And you need us to be there, Grace said. Sadie's testimony would be powerful. Not details about the abduction, just her saying that Polson visited your home before she was taken, that she asked questions about your family, your schedules, your vulnerabilities. Grace and Thomas exchanged a long look, the kind of look that passes between parents facing an impossible choice. No, Colt blinked. No. Our daughter has been through enough. We're not putting her in front of that woman. We're not making her relive this in a room full of strangers. Colt nodded slowly. I understand. I wouldn't ask if there was another way. There might be. Grace pulled out her phone. Sadie drew pictures. After she came home, Dr. Crawford suggested art therapy, drawing the things she remembered as a way of processing the trauma. She scrolled through her photos. She drew the car, the houses they stopped at, the children she saw through the door, and she drew her. Grace turned the phone toward Colt. The drawing was crude as all children's drawings are, but it was unmistakably Denise Polson. Brown hair, nice smile, holding a clipboard, and written in careful crayon letters at the top, the lady who came to our house before the bad man took me. She drew this 3 days ago, before we knew anything about Polson being involved, before anyone told her who the woman was. Colt stared at the drawing. This is evidence. Real evidence from a child witness created before she could have been influenced or coached. Take it. Use it however you need to. Just keep our daughter out of the spotlight. Colt took the phone carefully. Thank you. This could be the thing that brings her down. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. You should know something. The FBI is working this case hard. Agent Hollister is good people, but they've got a leak. Someone inside is feeding information to the network. Thomas's face hardened. What does that mean for us? It means be careful what you say and who you say it to. Don't trust anyone outside this room with details about Sadie's testimony. And if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call me immediately. He handed Thomas a card with his number. Day or night, I'll be there. The community event was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at the Riverside Community Center. 200 people had registered to attend Denise Polson's presentation on protecting your children from predators. Colt arrived early with Tommy, Darlene, and Bo. They wore civilian clothes, nothing to identify them as club members. They positioned themselves strategically around the room, watching exits, monitoring the crowd. Polson was already there setting up her presentation at the front of the room. She moved with confident efficiency, adjusting her laptop, arranging handouts, chatting warmly with early arrivals. The perfect image of a caring community advocate. Colt watched her and felt his stomach turn. This woman had sat in Grace Holloway's kitchen, had played with Sadie's hair, asking questions about her school and her routine, had smiled and nodded and taken mental notes that she later passed to men who sold children. And in 30 minutes, she was going to stand up and tell these parents how to protect their kids. The room filled steadily. Mothers and fathers, grandparents, even a few teenagers who'd been dragged along by concerned family members. They found seats, pulled out notebooks, prepared to learn from an expert. None of them knew the expert was the danger. At 2 o'clock precisely, Polson stepped up to the microphone. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I know Saturday afternoons are precious, especially for busy parents. But there's nothing more important than the safety of our children, and that's exactly what we're here to discuss. Her voice was warm, engaging, practiced. She had clearly given this presentation many times. The most dangerous predators, she continued, are often the ones who seem most trustworthy. They don't look like monsters. They look like neighbors, coaches, family friends. They infiltrate our communities. They build relationships. They gain access. Colt felt sick. Every word was true, and every word was a description of exactly what she did. For 40 minutes, Paulson talked about internet safety, stranger danger, teaching children to recognize inappropriate behavior. She used statistics and case studies and real-world examples. She answered questions thoughtfully and at length. She was Colt had to admit, very good at this. When the Q&A portion began, Darlene raised her hand. Ms. Polson, you mentioned it that Families First does home assessments for vulnerable families. Can you tell us more about what that involves? Polson smiled. Of course, we visit families who might need support services. We evaluate their situation, housing stability, childcare arrangements, support networks, and connect them with appropriate resources. It's all about making sure every family has what they need to thrive. And you keep records of these assessments. Naturally, everything is documented and confidential. How do you ensure that information stays confidential? Darlene pressed. Detailed information about family vulnerabilities, children's schedules, support networks. That kind of data could be very valuable to the wrong people. Polson's smile flickered. All our records are strictly protected. Only authorized staff have access. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm just curious about your data security protocols. After all information about vulnerable children, it would be terrible if that fell into the wrong hands. The room had gone quiet. People were looking between Darlene and Polson with growing unease. I can assure you, Tannen, Polson said, her voice cooling, that Families First maintains the highest ethical standards. Now, are there any other questions? A man in the back raised his hand. Tommy. I've got one. A friend of mine, her family was visited by your organization about 2 years ago. Nice woman came to their house, asked a lot of questions about their kids. 6 months later, their 8-year-old daughter went missing. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Polson's face went pale. I'm very sorry to hear about that, but I don't see how. What's strange, Tommy continued, is that the police barely investigated, classified it as a runaway, an 8-year-old runaway. Does that sound right to you? I really can't comment on individual cases. How about 17 cases? The room went dead silent. Bo stood up holding a folder. We've been doing some research. 17 children from families your organization assessed have gone missing in the past 3 years. All within 6 months of your home visits. All barely investigated. That's a hell of a coincidence, don't you think? Polson's composure cracked. This is outrageous. You're making baseless accusations. Are they baseless? Colt spoke for the first time, his voice carrying through the room. Because we have documentation. Financial ties between your nonprofit and shell companies linked to trafficking operations. Records of you accessing confidential county files without authorization. He held up his phone showing the photograph of Sadie's drawing. And we have this, a picture drawn by a 6-year-old girl who was abducted from Riverside Park 2 weeks ago. She drew it before anyone told her your name, before she knew you were connected to what happened to her. The room erupted. Parents were on their feet, shouting questions, demanding answers. Some were already on their phones, calling police, calling lawyers, calling anyone who might listen. Polson grabbed her purse and headed for the exit. I don't have to listen to this. This is slander. I'm calling my lawyer. Call whoever you want, Colt said. But the FBI already has copies of everything. Agent Hollister is very interested in talking to you. Polson froze at the door. For just a second, her mask dropped completely. And Colt saw the real person underneath. Cold calculating, cornered. Then she was gone, practically running to her car. The room descended into chaos. Parents demanding answers from anyone who would listen. Local officials being cornered and questioned. Phones recording everything. Colt slipped out the side door. Bo was waiting. She's making calls, panic calls from the look of it. Good. Let her panic. Let her reach out to her contacts. Every call she makes gives us more information. You think she'll run? Probably, but it doesn't matter. The story's out now. Even if she disappears, the investigation continues. Colt looked back at the community center where the carefully constructed world of Denise Polson was crumbling in real time. One predator exposed, but the network was still out there. The boss was still operating. The children Sadie had seen through that door were still missing. This wasn't the end. It was barely the beginning. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You've made powerful enemies, people who can make your club disappear. Step back now and you'll be rewarded. Continue and everyone you love will suffer. Colt stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed his reply. Come try. The threats didn't stop. Over the next 48 hours, Colt received 3 more messages. The first showed a photograph of the Iron Horse Tavern taken from across the street at night. The second showed his house. The third showed the Holloway home with a single word, careful. He showed them to the club at their emergency meeting. They're trying to scare us off. Bo said, his voice tight with anger. It's working, admitted Jimmy. My wife wants me to step back. Says she didn't sign up for this. Nobody's judging anyone who wants out, Colt said. This isn't club business. It's personal. If you need to protect your family. My family is protected by finishing this, Tommy interrupted. These people traffic children. You think they'll stop at threats. You think backing down makes us safe. Bo nodded. Tommy's right. We're already in this. Only way out is through. Colt looked around the table. Every man present, every man committed. Then we escalate. Raven, what do we have on that Wyoming property? Darlene pulled up satellite images on her laptop. Remote location about 40 miles from the nearest town. Property records show it's owned by Mountain Vista Holdings. Same shell company connected to Wells and Paulson. Recent construction includes a reinforced main building and what looks like underground additions. Underground, Bo repeated. Why would they need underground space? Nobody answered. Nobody wanted to. I've been monitoring Paulson's communications since she fled the community event. Darlene continued. She made 6 calls in the first hour. 3 to lawyers, 1 to an unknown number, and 2 to this property's landline. She warned them. Can we get access to those calls? Not legally, but I have contacts at the phone company who owe me favors. I should have transcripts by tonight. Colt stood and walked to the window. We need eyes on that property. Physical surveillance. See what we're dealing with before we make any moves. I'll go, Tommy volunteered immediately. Wraith trained me in reconnaissance. I can get close without being seen. Take Bo as backup, but observation only. We don't know how many people are there or what kind of security they have. Understood. And Tommy, if you see children, you call it in immediately to me and to Agent Hollister. We don't sit on that information. Got it. They left within the hour, taking Tommy's truck rather than motorcycles. Less conspicuous. Colt spent the afternoon going through Darlene's research, building a picture of the network structure. Polson was the scout. Schiller had been the snatcher, now in a coma. Someone named Wells provided political cover. The Wyoming property was some kind of hub. But there were still gaps. Who were the buyers? How did they move the children? Where did the money flow? His phone rang. Mr. Brennan? The voice was smooth, cultured, confident. The voice of someone who had never faced real consequences. My name is Garrett Wells. I believe you have been looking for me. Colt's hand tightened on the phone. Where are the children? Safe for now, which is more than I can say for you and your associates. Is this the part where you threaten my family? My club, because I've got to tell you, we've heard it all before. Wells laughed softly. I don't threaten, Mr. Brennan. I inform. And what I'm informing you is that you're playing a game you don't understand. The network you've stumbled into has been operating for decades. It has protection at every level of government. The FBI agent you've been working with, her supervisor, has been on our payroll for 5 years. How do you think we've operated so long without interference? Every network has weak points. True, you found one. Denise Polson, careless woman, left too many traces. But eliminating one scout doesn't damage the infrastructure. We'll have a replacement within weeks. And Schiller, the man in the coma, a liability who knew too much. His accident was unfortunate but necessary. Colt's blood ran cold. They'd killed their own man to protect secrets. What do you want, Wells? To offer you a choice. Walk away now, disband your little investigation, return to your motorcycles and your bar, and we'll consider the matter closed. Continue and we'll dismantle everything you've built. Your club, your reputation, your freedom. We have enough planted evidence to put you away for life. And the children, not your concern. Colt looked across the room where Darlene was working, where his brother sat waiting. These men who had become his family. These monsters who fought other monsters. Let me make you a counter offer, he said quietly. Release those children within 48 hours, or I will personally put you in the ground. Not a threat, not a promise, a guarantee. You're in no position to. 48 hours, well, starting now. He hung up and crushed the phone under his boot. Tommy's voice crackled over the radio an hour later. We're in position. Colt, there's activity, multiple vehicles, armed guards, dogs. This isn't just a holding facility, it's a fortress. Any sign of children? Not yet, but wait. A long pause. Colt could hear Tommy breathing, could almost feel the tension through the connection. East side of the main building, window with bars. I see movement, small figures. Another pause. Colt, they're kids. At least 5, maybe more. Young ones. And the phone nearly cracked in Colt's grip. Get out of there. Don't engage. Return to base. But that's an order. We need to regroup. He ended the call and turned to Darlene. 5 children minimum. Confirmed visual. Armed guards, dogs, fortified position. How long until the FBI can get a warrant? Darlene's jaw tightened. Days, maybe a week if Wells keeps blocking through his contacts. Those children don't have a week. He pulled out Agent Hollister's card and dialed. She answered on the second ring. Mr. Brennan, I was about to call you. We found them, the children, there at the Wyoming property. My men have eyes on at least 5 kids behind barred windows. Silence on the line. How reliable is this information? My guy is former Navy SEAL, 3 tours. He knows what he saw. More silence. I believe you, but I can't move without a warrant, and every warrant application is being flagged and delayed. Garrett Wells has connections in the state attorney's office. Then move without a warrant. If I do that, the case gets thrown out. These people walk. If you don't do that, children get sold or killed, which is worse. Hollister's voice dropped. Meet me at the old mill outside town. 1 hour, don't bring anyone. The old mill was abandoned, used occasionally by teenagers for parties and by the homeless for shelter. When Colt arrived, Hollister was already there, leaning against her government sedan with her arms crossed. She looked exhausted and worried. You've been busy, she said as he approached. We've been doing your job. That's exactly what we need to discuss. She pushed off from the car. The stunt you pulled at the community event exposing Polson, it accelerated everything. Good, that was the point. No, you don't understand. The network is moving fast. We've intercepted communications suggesting they're liquidating assets, destroying evidence, relocating operations. Colt's stomach dropped. Relocating operations? You mean the children? We don't know for certain, but if they're spooked enough to burn their infrastructure, they might decide certain liabilities need to disappear. The word liabilities hit Colt like a punch to the gut. Children reduced to business terminology, packages, products, liabilities. Then move on them. You have enough for warrants. It's not that simple. Wells has connections. I know about his connections. I talked to him today. He threatened everyone I love if I don't back off. Hollister's eyes widened. He called you directly. Made me a counteroffer. Walk away and be rewarded. Continue and self-offer. I told him to go to hell. Jesus Christ, Brennan. Do you understand what you're dealing with? Better than you think. What I need to know is whether the FBI is going to do something about it or whether I need to handle this myself. Hollister was quiet for a long moment. What exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing that we stop playing by rules designed to protect predators. Those kids in that compound don't have time for warrants and jurisdictional disputes. They need someone to kick down the door and carry them to safety. And if you do that, if you storm that compound without legal authority, Then I face the consequences, but those children go home. Hollister stared at him. You'd go to prison for this. I'd do worse than prison for this. My daughter died because no one came for her in time. I won't let that happen again. Not when I can stop it. The silence stretched between them. Hollister seemed to be wrestling with something, some internal debate between duty and justice. Finally, she spoke. I can't authorize what you're suggesting. I can't be part of it. If you do this, you're on your own. She paused. But I can tell you that my team will be conducting a routine training exercise tomorrow night. We'll be unreachable for approximately 4 hours starting at midnight. And if during that time something were to happen at a certain property in Wyoming, we would be unable to respond until our exercise concluded. Colt understood. And if we found evidence during that time, children who needed immediate rescue, then you would call 911 like any concerned citizen, and we would respond as soon as we were available. By which point, presumably, any immediate threats would have been neutralized by whatever circumstances presented themselves. A ghost of a smile crossed Colt's face. You're better than I gave you credit for. I'm tired of watching children disappear while we file paperwork. Whatever happens tomorrow night, make sure those kids come home. She got back in her car. And Brennan, the man you killed in that compound, the one who will undoubtedly resist arrest and threaten the lives of innocent children. Colt said nothing. Make sure he resists convincingly. She drove away, leaving Colt alone in the darkness. He pulled out his phone and called Darlene. Rally everyone. We move tomorrow night, full tactical, and Raven, find out everything you can about the internal layout of that compound. Every entrance, every exit, every blind spot. What changed? We got a green light, sort of. He ended the call and looked up at the Montana sky. Stars were emerging, millions of them, more than you could ever count. Somewhere under those same stars, children were waiting in the dark, scared, alone, hoping someone would come. Hold on, Colt whispered to them. We're coming. The emergency church meeting convened at midnight. 15 men gathered around the worn wooden table. 12 from the Steel Brotherhood, plus 3 from a neighboring chapter who had heard what was happening and volunteered to help. All of them veterans, all of them fathers or brothers or uncles. Colt stood at the head of the table and laid it out plain. There are children in that compound. Confirmed. Armed guards, dogs, reinforced buildings. The FBI can't move for legal reasons. If we wait for them, those kids get sold or killed. He let that sink in. I'm not going to pretend this is anything other than what it is. We go in there, we're breaking about a dozen laws. Trespassing, breaking and entering, probably assault. Anyone who gets caught is facing serious time. What's the alternative? Bo asked. The alternative is we do nothing. We trust the system. We hope the FBI gets their warrant before the network liquidates. Silence around the table. My daughter would be 34 this year. Colt continued, his voice rough. If she'd lived, she was taken because I wasn't there to protect her. I couldn't save her. But those kids in that compound, they're still alive. Right now, tonight, they're still alive. And I refuse to sit here and do nothing while that changes. Tommy stood. I'm in. Bo stood. In. One by one, every man in the room rose to his feet. Colt nodded slowly. Then let's plan. For the next 3 hours, they mapped out the operation. Tommy's reconnaissance had given them layout details, guard positions, patrol patterns, potential entry points. Darlene worked her contacts to cut power to the property at a specific time. Another brother knew a guy who could jam cell signals for a 20-minute window. The plan was simple. Hit fast, hit hard, secure the children, get out before anyone could respond. What about the guards? Jimmy asked. Neutralize. Don't kill. Colt's voice was firm. We're not murderers. These are hired guns. Probably don't even know what they're protecting. We put them down. We secure them. We leave them for the cops. And if they shoot first, Colt's jaw tightened. Then we respond appropriately, but only in self-defense. Anyone who goes in there looking for blood is out. Understood. Nods around the room. We move at 0300, 3 teams. Alpha takes the main building. That's me, Tommy, and Bo. Bravo secures the perimeter. Snake, Jimmy, and the boys from the other chapter. Charlie handles extraction. Raven and the vehicles. He paused. Any questions? What about Agent Hollister? Darlene asked. I'll call her after we're inside. Give her enough time to respond, but not enough to stop us. If this works, she gets credit for a major bust. If it doesn't, he shrugged. We'll deal with that when we have to. One more thing, Tommy said. If there are kids in there, they're going to be traumatized, terrified. They see a bunch of scary bikers busting down doors, they might panic. Good point, Colt thought for a moment. Raven, you go in with Alpha Team. The kids see a woman first might help them stay calm. Darlene nodded. I can do that. Then we're set. Everyone gets some rest. Tomorrow night we bring those children home. But the Wyoming compound was empty. They arrived at 0245, moving in tactical silence through the darkness. The power had been cut as planned. The cell signals were jammed. Everything was going in according to schedule, until Tommy reported from his forward position. Main building is dark, no movement, no heat signatures. Colt's gut clenched. What about the guards, the dogs? Gone, all of it. The place is a ghost town. They cleared the compound anyway, room by room, hoping against hope that they'd find something, someone, anything. What they found was evidence of hasty evacuation. Mattresses in the basement, small ones child-sized. Restraints bolted to walls. A medical area with sedatives and examination equipment. And in a burn barrel outside the charred remains of files and photographs. Darlene pulled fragments from the ashes, trying to salvage anything readable. Too much damage? Most of it's gone. Most isn't all. Keep looking. Tommy emerged from the main building, holding something. Found this hidden in a wall panel. They missed it. A laptop. Darlene grabbed it immediately, her fingers flying across the keyboard. If I can crack the encryption... Colt stood in the center of the empty compound, feeling the weight of failure crushing his chest. They'd been so close. So goddamn close. How did they know? Bo's voice was tight with frustration. We didn't tell anyone. Someone did. Colt's mind was racing. Someone in the FBI. Someone who knew about Hollister's training exercise. Her supervisor, Collins. He's on Wells's payroll. It had to be. Wells had told him as much on the phone. The FBI agent you've been working with, her supervisor, has been on our payroll for 5 years. They knew we were coming. They cleared out. The children... He couldn't finish the sentence. Colt. Darlene's voice cut through the despair. I cracked the laptop. He was beside her in seconds. On the screen, files were cascading open. Names, dates, transactions, transfer records, buyer identities, payment routing. This is their operational database, Darlene said, her voice trembling with a mixture of horror and hope. Everything, schedules, locations, contacts. She looked up, tears in her eyes. There's an address, current, updated this morning. Where? A private airfield outside Helena. Flight scheduled for tomorrow night. Cargo manifest lists 11 packages under age 10. 11 children, under age 10. Colt felt something shift in his chest, not hope. Hope was too gentle a word. This was something fiercer, something that burned. Tomorrow night, Thursday, 2200 hours. He looked at his watch. They had less than 48 hours. How confident are you in this information? Very. This is their master system. They wouldn't have left it if they'd known it was here. Colt turned to face his brothers. New target, Helena Airfield, 48 hours. We can make it, Tommy said, but we'll be going in blind. No recon, no layout, no idea what we're facing. We know what we're facing, people who sell children, and we know what we're fighting for. He pulled out his phone. I need to make a call. Grace Holloway answered on the second ring, her voice tight with worry. Mr. Brennan, it's 3 a.m. Is everything... I need to talk to Sadie. Silence. She's asleep. Wake her up, please. It's important. More silence, then shuffling sounds, a door opening, gentle voices. Mr. Colt. Sadie's voice was thick with sleep, but alert. This was a child who had learned to wake up fast to be ready for anything. Hey, Sadie Bug, I'm sorry to wake you up. It's okay. Did something happen? Did you find the other kids? Not yet, but I need your help. I need you to remember something for me. Okay. When you were in the car with the bad man, You said he talked about 11 packages and Thursday night in the usual place. Do you remember anything else? Anything at all about where the usual place might be? Sadie was quiet for a long moment. Colt could almost hear her thinking, sifting through memories she'd rather forget. He said something about birds, she finally said. Big metal birds. And he said the boss would be there this time, because it was an important shipment. The boss, that's what he called him. He was scared of the boss. You could hear it in his voice. Anything else? Anything about the location? The time? Another pause. He said 2200. When I remember, because I did not know what that meant. Mommy had to explain that it's how soldiers say 10 o'clock at night. Colt felt a surge of something that might have been hope. You're incredible, Sadie. You know that the bravest, smartest kid I've ever met. I'm not brave. I'm just trying to help. That's exactly what brave means. He paused. Sadie, I need you to do something else for me. Something hard. What? I need you to send a message to the kids who are still out there. The ones we're going to save. How will film on? I'm going to record you on video, just a few words. We'll play it for them when we find them. So they know they're not alone. So they know someone was fighting for them. Sadie was quiet. Okay, she finally said. What should I say? Whatever feels right, whatever you would have wanted to hear when you were shared and alone in that car. Another pause. Then, I got away. Help is coming. Be brave. Promise, promise. Colt had to close his eyes for a moment. That's perfect. Sadie Bug, absolutely perfect. Mr. Colt, yay. You're going to find them, right? You're going to bring them home. I'm going to do everything in my power. Promise, promise. Good. Because they need you, like I needed you. He ended the call and stood in the darkness of the empty compound, surrounded by brothers who had become his family, holding a laptop full of evidence and a phone full of hope. 48 hours, 11 children. One chance. Let's move, he said. We've got work to do. The night before the raid, Sadie Holloway couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars her father had stuck to the ceiling 3 years ago, back when her biggest fear was the monster under the bed. Now she knew the real monsters wore polo shirts and drove nice cars and smiled at you in parks. The house was quiet. Her parents had gone to bed hours ago, but Sadie could hear her mother's restless movements through the wall. Grace wasn't sleeping either. None of them slept well anymore. Sadie pushed back her unicorn comforter and slipped out of bed. Her bare feet made no sound on the hardwood floor as she crossed to her desk, the small one her father had built for her 6th birthday, decorated with carved flowers along the edges. She pulled out a box of crayons and a stack of construction paper. For the next 2 hours, she wrote letters. Dear kid. The first one began in careful 6-year-old handwriting. My name is Sadie. I was scared like you, but I got away. Help is coming for you too. Be brave. You are not alone. She wrote 11 letters, one for each child she knew was waiting in the darkness. She didn't know their names. She didn't know if they were boys or girls, if they liked dinosaurs or princesses, if they had dogs or cats or goldfish waiting for them at home. But she knew they were scared. She knew they were hoping someone would come. And she knew that hope was the thing that kept you alive when everything else wanted you dead. By the time the sun began to lighten the Montana sky, Sadie had a stack of letters, each one folded carefully into a small square, each one carrying words she wished someone had said to her during those 47 hours of terror. She heard her mother's footsteps in the hallway and quickly gathered the letters, stuffing them into her backpack alongside her favorite stuffed elephant. Sadie. Grace appeared in the doorway, her face soft with worry. What are you doing up so early? I couldn't sleep. Grace crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, pulling Sadie into her arms. Me neither, baby. Me neither. They sat together in the growing light, mother and daughter, waiting for the day that would change everything. At the Iron Horse Tavern, preparations were underway. The main room had been transformed into a command center. Maps covered every surface, marked with routes and positions and contingency plans. Darlene worked at her laptop, coordinating communications. Tommy checked and rechecked equipment. Bo distributed tactical gear to the men who would be going in. Colt stood apart from the others, staring at a photograph he'd pulled from his wallet. Meredith, at 12 years old, laughing at something off camera, her dark hair wild around her face. The last good picture he had of her before everything changed. She'd be proud of you. He turned to find Darlene beside him. Maybe. Or maybe she'd tell me I'm a damn fool for going up against people like this. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Colt almost smiled. No, I suppose they're not. He tucked the photograph away. Everyone ready, as will ever be. Tommy's team is set for the perimeter. Bo's handling the main entry. I'll be on comms with Agent Hollister's team coordinating the official response once we're inside. And the extraction vehicles. 3 vans unmarked positioned at the secondary exit point. Medical supplies in each one. Blankets, water, first aid kits. Whatever those kids need. Colt nodded slowly. This is it, Raven. 20 years of waiting. 20 years of watching other families go through what I went through. Tonight we finally do something about it. Tonight we bring them home. At 1900 hours, the teams began moving. They took separate routes to avoid attention, converging on a rally point 3 miles from the Helena airfield. The sun was setting, painting the Montana sky in shades of orange and purple, the mountains turning to black silhouettes against the dying light. Colt gathered everyone for a final briefing. The airfield has minimal security, 2 guards at the main gate, maybe 3 more roving. The aircraft is scheduled for departure at 2200. Based on the database, Raven recovered the children will be transported from a holding location approximately 2 hours before takeoff. That gives us a window between 2000 and 2100 to intercept. He looked around at the faces of his brothers. Our primary objective is the children. Everything else is secondary. We neutralize threats, we secure the kids, we get them to safety. No heroics, no revenge, just the mission. What about Wells? Bo asked. The database says he's overseeing this shipment personally. If we encounter him, we detain him for the FBI. But he's not the priority. The children are the priority, always. Rules of engagement. Non-lethal unless absolutely necessary. These guards are hired muscle. They probably don't know what they're protecting. We put them down, we secure them, we move on. He paused, his voice hardening. But if anyone points a weapon at a child, all bets are off. Nods around the circle. One more thing. Colt pulled out his phone and played Sadie's recorded message. I got away. Help is coming. Be brave. Promise, promise. The words echoed in the evening air, small and fierce and absolutely unbreakable. That's why we're here, Colt said. That little girl ran into a bar full of strangers because she believed someone would help her. She was right. Tonight we prove her right again. For every child in that compound. For every family waiting for their kids to come home. He looked up at the darkening sky. Let's move. The airfield was smaller than Colt expected. A single runway, 2 hangars, a cluster of outbuildings, and a main structure that looked like it had once been an administrative office. Chain-link fence surrounded the perimeter, topped with razor wire that gleamed in the moonlight. Tommy's reconnaissance had been accurate. 2 guards at the main gate, 3 more patrolling in irregular patterns. Dogs were absent tonight, probably deemed unnecessary for a quick operation. Their mistake. At 2000 hours, Darlene cut the power. The airfield went dark. Emergency lights flickered on in the main building, casting weak pools of illumination that created more shadows than they dispelled. Bo's team moved first, taking the perimeter guards with silent efficiency. Former military training applied to a purpose more righteous than any war. Colt led Alpha Team through a gap in the fence that Tommy had identified during his earlier surveillance. They moved in tactical formation, shadows among shadows converging on the main building. Through the windows, Colt could see movement, figures rushing around inside responding to the power outage. And there, in a back room visible through a partially open door, he saw what he'd come for. Children. At least 10 of them huddled together on a bare concrete floor. Small bodies pressed against each other for comfort, small faces pale with fear. The oldest looked maybe 9. The youngest couldn't have been more than 4. Colt felt something break open in his chest. Rage and sorrow and determination all fused together into something that burned. Alpha Team, I have eyes on the packages. Rear building, east side. Approximately 10 to 12 children guarded by at least 2 hostiles. Bravo in position, ticking. Tommy's voice crackled through the earpiece. Perimeter secure. All external guards neutralized. Charlie standing by for extraction, Darlene reported. Vehicles ready. Alpha moving in. They hit the front door at 2015. Bo went through first, his massive frame filling the doorway like a force of nature. The first guard reached for his weapon, and found himself on the floor before his hand touched the grip, Bo's boot on his chest, and a very large gun pointed at his face. "Don't," Bo said simply. The guard didn't. Colt and Tommy cleared the front room, moving with the precision of men who had trained for moments like this. Two more guards both neutralized before they could raise an alarm. Zip ties secured their wrists. Duct tape covered their mouths. "Clear," Tommy reported. They moved deeper into the building. The hallway was dark, lit only by the emergency lights that cast everything in shades of red. Doors lined both sides, most of them closed. Colt's heart pounded as he approached the one he'd seen through the window. He could hear crying now, soft, muffled sobs from children who had learned that loud sounds brought punishment. Colt positioned himself beside the door. Tommy took the other side. Bo covered their backs. 3, 2, 1. Tommy kicked the door open and Colt went through, weapon up, scanning for threats. One guard standing near the far wall, automatic rifle swinging toward the children. Colt didn't hesitate. His shot took the man in the shoulder, spinning him away from the kids before he could bring his weapon to bear. A second shot lower dropped him to the ground with a scream that echoed off the concrete walls. "Threat down! Room secure!" And then Colt saw them clearly for the first time. 11 children, bound hands, gagged mouths, eyes wide with terror. They ranged in age from about 4 to maybe 10. Some were crying, others had gone silent, and still the dangerous stillness of children who had learned that survival meant invisibility. Darlene came through the door behind him, moving past the men with quiet purpose. "It's okay," she said, her voice soft but steady. "It's okay, you're safe now. We're here to take you home." She knelt among the children, cutting zip ties, removing gags, gathering the smallest ones into her arms, with a mother's instinct that transcended biology. "My name is Darlene. This is my friend Colt. We're going to get you out of here. Your mommies and daddies are waiting for you. Everything is going to be okay." A little girl with red braids, maybe 5 years old, looked up at Darlene with eyes that held far too much knowledge for her age. "Are you angels?" Darlene's voice caught. "Something like that, sweetheart. Something like that." "Alpha, this is Bravo." Tommy's voice was urgent. "We've got company. Vehicle approaching from the north. Looks like a high-end sedan. One passenger in back." Colt's jaw tightened. "Wells." "Confirmed. The boss has arrived." Of course he had. The database said he was overseeing this shipment personally. Too much money on the line to trust subordinates with such valuable cargo. "Bravo, intercept and detain. Non-lethal if possible." "And copy that." Colt turned back to the room where 11 children were being freed from their restraints. "Raven, get them to the extraction point. I'll handle Wells." Darlene looked up, her face hard. "Colt, go. Those kids are the priority. Get them safe." She nodded and began herding the children toward the rear exit, her voice a constant stream of comfort and encouragement. Colt moved toward the front of the building. He found Garrett Wells in the main room, held at gunpoint by Tommy and 2 other brothers. The businessman looked exactly as Colt had imagined. Expensive suit, manicured, hands, the smug expression of a man who believed his money and connections made him untouchable. That expression flickered when he saw Colt approach. "Mr. Brennan?" His voice was smooth, controlled, showing no signs of fear despite his situation. "I must say I'm impressed. I didn't think you had the resources for something like this." "Shut up." Colt crossed the room until he was standing directly in front of Wells. The man was shorter than he'd expected, smaller, the mastermind of an empire built on stolen children, and he looked like any middle-aged businessman you might pass on the street. "Do you know what I've spent the last 20 years doing?" Colt asked quietly. "I imagine you're about to tell me." "I've spent 20 years living with the fact that I couldn't save my daughter. 20 years of wondering what her last moments were like. Whether she called for me. Whether she died hoping her daddy would come." Wells's smile tightened. "Tragic, truly. But I failed to see how." Colt's fist connected with Wells's face before the man could finish his sentence. The businessman crumpled, blood streaming from his nose, his expensive suit suddenly looking much less impressive. "That's for Meredith." He hit him again. "That's for Sadie." And again. "And that's for every child you've ever touched." Tommy put a hand on Colt's shoulder. "Colt, that's enough. He's done." Colt stood over the groaning man, his chest heaving, his knuckles split and bleeding. The rage that had sustained him for 20 years was burning itself out, leaving something else in its place. Not peace, not yet, but maybe the beginning of peace. Get him secured. The FBI will want him alive. He turned away and walked toward the rear of the building, toward the sounds of children's voices and Darlene's steady reassurances. Outside, the night was cool and clear. Stars blazed overhead, more stars than you could ever count. The extraction vehicles were waiting their engines, running doors open. Darlene was loading children into the vans one by one, counting heads to make sure no one was left behind. 11, she reported as Colt approached. All 11 plus 2 more we found in a side room. 13 total. 13 children, saved from whatever fate Wells had planned for them. Saved from becoming another statistic, another cold case, another family destroyed. Any injuries? Minor, dehydration, some bruising. They'll need medical attention and a lot of therapy, but they're alive. They're going to be okay. Colt nodded slowly. Let's get them out of here. He pulled out his phone and dialed Agent Hollister. It's done. 13 children, all safe. Wells is in custody. We're heading to the rally point now. A long pause on the other end. 13. The database said 11. We found 2 more. Another pause. My team is 20 minutes out. Hold position if you can. We'll be here. He ended the call and looked at the vans full of children, at the brothers who had risked everything to save them, at the stars wheeling overhead in their eternal dance. We did it, Bo said, appearing at his shoulder. We actually did it. Not yet. Not until those kids are home with their families. Not until Wells is behind bars. Not until every piece of this network is burned to the ground. But something had shifted. Something that had been frozen for 20 years was finally beginning to thaw. Hey, Mr. Colt. He turned to find the little girl with red braids looking up at him from the back of one of the vans. Her face was dirty, her eyes were haunted, but there was something else there too. Something that looked like hope. Yes, sweetheart. Are we really going home? Colt crouched down to her level. Yes, you're really going home, I promise. Promise, promise. The words hit him like a physical blow. The same words Sadie used. The same desperate need for certainty in a world that had proven itself cruel and unpredictable. Promise, promise. The girl smiled, small and tentative, like a flower opening after a long frost. Thank you for coming for us. You're welcome, sweetheart. You're very welcome. The FBI arrived 18 minutes later. Agent Hollister was first on the scene, her face tight with a mixture of relief and professional concern. Jesus Christ, she breathed, taking in the scope of the operation. You actually pulled it off. Told you I would. Wells inside, a little banged up, but he'll live. He resisted arrest. Hollister's eyebrow rose. Did he? Vigorously. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. I'm sure the official report will reflect that. The next few hours were controlled chaos. Federal agents processing the scene, paramedics examining children, statements being taken, evidence being cataloged, local police arriving, then state police, then more federal agents as the scope of the operation became clear. Through it all, Colt stayed close to the children, watching over them, making sure they knew they were safe, answering their questions as honestly as he could. Where's my mommy? She's coming, sweetheart. She's coming as fast as she can. Is the bad man going to hurt us again? Never, I promise. He's never going to hurt anyone again. Are you a policeman? No, I'm just someone who cares about kids. The reunions began around midnight. Parents arrived in a steady stream, faces pale with hope and terror, not quite believing until they held their children in their arms. The sounds they made, these mothers and fathers meeting their stolen children, were sounds Colt would carry with him for the rest of his life. Joy and grief and relief all tangled together into something that transcended words. He watched from a distance, giving the families their privacy, feeling the weight of 20 years beginning to lift from his shoulders. Agent Hollister found him as dawn began to lighten the sky. 13 children recovered, 7 arrests. Enough evidence to bring down the entire Northwest operation. And Wells is talking, trying to cut a deal by giving up his contacts. Is it working? Not a chance. The DA wants to make an example of him. Life without parole minimum. Colt nodded slowly. And my people? What people? I don't see any people. Just a bunch of concerned citizens who happened to be in the area when federal agents needed assistance. That's a generous interpretation. It's the only interpretation that matters. She paused. You did good, Brennan. Those children are alive because of you. They're alive because a 6-year-old girl was brave enough to run into a bar full of bikers and ask for help. I just followed where she led. 8 months later, Colt sat in a federal courtroom watching Garrett Wells face justice. The trial had been a marathon. Weeks of testimony, evidence, legal maneuvering. The defense had tried everything, challenging evidence, questioning witnesses, attempting to paint Wells as a legitimate businessman who'd been framed by criminal elements. None of it worked. The testimony of the rescued children delivered via video to protect their identities was devastating. Small voices describing horrors that no child should ever know. Parents sobbing in the gallery. Jurors wiping their eyes. And then Sadie Holloway took the stand. She was 7 now, a little taller, a little older, but with the same eyes that held too much knowledge that had looked at Colt in the Iron Horse Tavern and asked for help. The defense attorney, a slick man in an expensive suit, approached her with the condescending smile of someone who thought he could intimidate a child. "Miss Holloway, you were only 6 years old when these alleged events occurred. Isn't it possible that your memory is unreliable?" Sadie looked at him steadily. "I was 6, but I remember everything." "Everything? That's a very strong claim for a young child. You were scared, confused, possibly drugged. How can we trust?" "I remember the smell of his car, medicine and fake flowers. I remember the sound of his voice on the phone saying premium price, like I was a toy at a store. I remember the other kids' faces through the windows when we stopped at houses. I remember being so scared I couldn't breathe." Her voice didn't waver. "I remember running into a bar full of bikers because I knew I needed help, and I wasn't afraid to ask for it. I remember the motorcycle man promising to keep me safe. Promise, promise." She turned and looked directly at Wells, who sat at the defense table trying to maintain his composure. "Your client didn't scare me then. He doesn't scare me now, and he's not going to scare any other kids ever again." The courtroom was absolutely silent. The defense attorney opened his mouth to respond, but the judge cut him off. "I think that's quite enough, counselor. The witness may step down." Sadie walked past the defense table, past Garrett Wells, and stopped. "My grandma used to say that the scariest looking people sometimes have the kindest hearts, and the nicest looking people are sometimes the real monsters." She looked at Wells one last time. She was right. The verdict came after 6 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts, 67 charges spanning trafficking, conspiracy, bribery, and murder. Life without parole. When the verdict was read, Wells finally broke. The mask of the confident businessman crumbled, revealing the desperate, pathetic man beneath. He screamed at the judge, at the jury, at anyone who would listen. "You don't understand. I have connections. I have protection. This isn't over." But it was over. Colt watched as the guards dragged Wells from the courtroom, his screams echoing off the marble walls until the heavy doors closed behind him. In the gallery, the families of rescued children held each other and wept. And somewhere in the crowd, a 6-year-old girl who had started it all smiled and squeezed her mother's hand. "Promise, promise." The letter arrived 6 weeks after the trial. It was delivered to the Iron Horse Tavern, addressed simply to Colt Brennan. No return address, just a plain white envelope with neat handwriting. Inside was a single page. "Mr. Brennan, by the time you read this, I'll be dead. I'm taking the coward's way out because I can't face what I've done. I can't face the families of all the children I failed to save. You asked me once through Agent Hollister why I did it. The answer is simple. I did it because I was afraid. Because I thought protecting my daughter meant surrendering to the people who took her. My name is William Collins. 20 years ago, I was an FBI agent investigating a trafficking case. I got too close. They took my daughter, Emily. She was 8 years old. They sent me a video and a message back, off or she dies. I backed off. I buried the case. I thought I could save her. They killed her anyway, and then they owned me. 20 years of covering up their crimes because I couldn't face what had happened to Emily. Because they had proof of my failure, and I was too much of a coward to let the world see it. Meredith would be 34 this year. Emily would be 28. They'll never grow up, never fall in love, never have children of their own. And I could have stopped the people who killed them. I had the power, the position, the information, but I was too broken to use it. You weren't broken. You turned your grief into something that saved lives. I turned mine into something that destroyed them. If there's a hell, I'm going to it. And I deserve every minute. William Collins, P.S. There's a safety deposit box in Helena First National Bank. Key is taped to the back of this letter. Inside, you'll find everything I never had the courage to use. Names, dates, operations, the complete architecture of the network. Use it, save the children I couldn't. Colt read the letter 3 times. Then he turned it over and found the key. The contents of Collins's safety deposit box took down an additional 47 people over the next 6 months. State legislators, police chiefs, business executives, a federal judge. The network's tendrils had spread further than anyone imagined. But what Colt found most valuable wasn't the names of the criminals. It was the names of the victims. Children who had disappeared over 20 years, their cases buried, their families left without answers. Collins had kept records of all of them, a secret accounting of his sins, including one name that made Colt's heart stop. Meredith Brennan, abducted June 15, 2006, deceased June 22, 2006, remains located at Pine Ridge Cemetery Plot, 847, Section C. Collins had known. All these years he had known where Meredith was buried, and he had said nothing. Colt wanted to hate him for that. Part of him did hate him, but a larger part understood. Collins had been broken by the same tragedy that had broken Colt. The only difference was how they had chosen to carry their grief. One had used it to hurt. One had used it to help. The funeral was held on a Sunday afternoon in late spring. They buried Meredith Brennan in the cemetery where her mother Elena had been laid to rest 15 years earlier. Cancer had taken Elena before they could find their daughter. Now finally the family was together again. The Steel Brotherhood came in full colors, their motorcycles lining the road in a gleaming procession. They stood at attention as the small casket was lowered into the ground, tears streaming down faces that had seen war and violence and death, but never anything quite like this. Sadie Holloway stood between her parents, holding Colt's hand. "Is Meredith happy now?" she whispered. "I think so, sweetheart. I think she's finally at peace." "And will you be sad forever?" Colt considered the question carefully. "No, I'll be sad sometimes when I think about what she missed. But mostly I'll remember the good parts. Her laugh, her smile, the way she used to wake me up on Saturday mornings by jumping on my bed." Sadie nodded solemnly. "That's how I want to remember the bad time. Not the scary parts. The part where you saved me. The part where I found my angels." The crowd dispersed slowly, leaving Colt alone at the graveside. He stood there for a long time watching the sun set, watching the sky shift from blue to gold to crimson. "I'm sorry it took so long," he finally said. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you. But I want you to know what happened because of you. Because losing you broke me into pieces, and those pieces turned into something that saved other children. Your memory protected 45 lives, baby girl. 45 children went home to their families because your dad refused to stop fighting." The wind stirred the flowers covering the grave. "I met a little girl named Sadie. She's 7 now. Most courageous child. She ran into a bar full of bikers because she knew she needed help, and she wasn't afraid to ask for it. She reminds me of you sometimes, that same stubbornness, that same fire." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I'm not going to stop, Meredith. As long as I'm breathing, I'm going to keep protecting children. I'm going to keep being the person you needed me to be when I wasn't there. And every kid we save, every family we make whole again, that's you. That's your legacy. That's what your life meant." He placed his hand on the headstone, feeling the cool marble beneath his palm. "I love you, baby girl. I always will. And I'll see you again someday. But not yet. I've got work to do." He walked away as the last light faded from the sky. Behind him, Meredith's headstone caught the final rays of sunset, the inscription glowing like gold. "Meredith Elena Brennan, beloved daughter, forever in our hearts, gone but never forgotten." 1 year later, the Iron Horse Tavern had been transformed. A new wing had been added to the main building, bright and welcoming. A sign above the entrance read, "Little Angels Community Center," in cheerful blue letters. Inside, the space had been transformed into a haven for at-risk youth. After-school programs, counseling services, emergency shelter for children in crisis. A partnership with local law enforcement had created a rapid response network for child protection cases. Other motorcycle clubs had reached out wanting to replicate the model. Colt had spent months traveling training, helping chapters across 6 states establish their own protection protocols. The Steel Brotherhood had become something more than a motorcycle club. They had become a movement. On a Saturday afternoon in July, the community center hosted a celebration for the families of rescued children. Parents and kids who had traveled from across the country to meet the men who had saved their sons and daughters. Colt watched from the porch as hardened bikers ran three-legged races with 5-year-olds. Bo sat in a corner, reading picture books to a circle of toddlers. Tommy was teaching older kids self-defense, explaining that awareness and preparation were the best protections. Sadie Holloway, now 8 years old, was everywhere at once, helping with games, comforting younger children, making sure everyone felt welcome. She had become a sort of unofficial ambassador for the center, a living symbol of what courage and hope could accomplish. She found Colt on the porch as the afternoon began to fade. "Mr. Colt, can I ask you something?" "Always, sweetheart." "When I grow up, can I be like Miss Darlene? Can I help save kids too?" Colt crouched down to her level. "You already saved kids, Sadie. You saved them by being brave enough to run through that door, by being brave enough to trust us, by being brave enough to testify in court. You've done more at 8 years old than most people do in a lifetime. But I want to do more. I want to be an angel like you." Colt felt his throat tighten. "You're already an angel, Sadie Bug. You don't need a motorcycle or a leather vest. You just need to keep being exactly who you are. Kind, brave, willing to stand up for people who need help." Sadie threw her arms around his neck. "I love you, Mr. Colt. I love you too, sweetheart. Always will." Thomas Holloway appeared looking apologetic. "Sadie, it's time to go. Your grandmother is waiting." "Okay, Daddy." Sadie released Colt and took her father's hand, then turned back. "Mr. Colt, will you come to my birthday party next month? I'm going to be 9. "Wouldn't miss it." "Promise, promise." Colt held up his pinky. "Promise, promise." Sadie grinned, linked her tiny finger with his, and let her father lead her away. Colt watched them go. The little girl who had changed everything. The family that had become his own. 10 years passed. Sadie Holloway stood in the doorway of the Little Angels Community Center, watching a familiar motorcycle pull into the parking lot. She was 16 now, tall and fierce, with her mother's gentle eyes and her father's stubborn chin. Colt climbed off his Harley, moving slower than he used to, his silver hair catching the afternoon light. He was 68 years old, and every one of those years showed in the lines on his face and the careful way he moved. But his eyes were still sharp, still alive with purpose. "Hey there, Sadie Bug. Hey yourself, old man." She hugged him, feeling the solid strength that age hadn't quite diminished. "Ready for your interview?" "As ready as I'll ever be." Sadie had applied to the FBI Academy. Agent Hollister, now Deputy Director Hollister, had written her recommendation personally. The interview was scheduled for tomorrow morning. They walked into the center together past the photographs that lined the walls. Pictures of rescued children, reunited families, community events. A visual history of everything they had built. "Nervous?" Colt asked. "A little." "Good. Nervous means you care." They sat on the porch as the sun began to set, watching the mountains turn to silhouettes against the darkening sky. "Can I tell you something?" Sadie asked. "Anything. I still have nightmares sometimes. About that car, about that house, about what would have happened if I hadn't run." Colt nodded slowly. "That's normal. Trauma doesn't go away. You just learn to carry it differently." "Is that what you did with Meredith?" "Eventually. It took a long time. And a brave little girl who ran into my bar and reminded me what I was supposed to be fighting for." Sadie was quiet for a moment. "I think about her sometimes, Meredith, about what she would have been like, what she would have done with her life." "Me too. I like to think she's watching, that she's proud of what we've built here, of what her death inspired." Colt felt the familiar ache in his chest, the grief that never quite went away, but it was softer now, gentler, more like a memorial than a wound. "I like to think that too." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged one by one, filling the Montana sky with their ancient light. "Mr. Colt, yeah, thank you for everything, for saving me, for believing in me, for being my angel when I needed one most. You saved yourself, Sadie. I just opened the door. You did a lot more than that. You showed me that scary-looking people can have the kindest hearts. You showed me that broken people can become protectors. You showed me that it's possible to turn the worst thing that ever happened to you into the best thing you ever do." She reached out and took his weathered hand in hers. Meredith would be 44 this year. And I think she'd want you to know something. She'd want you to know that her father spent 20 years protecting children in her name, that her memory saved hundreds of lives, that she mattered even after she was gone. Colt's vision blurred. She told you that? Sadie smiled. She didn't have to. I figured it out myself. The next morning, a scared child ran into the community center. She was maybe 7 years old, dirty, and bruised, her eyes wide with terror. She'd escaped from somewhere, run from someone, found the one place that looked like it might be safe. Sadie was the first to reach her. She knelt down, making herself small and unthreatening, and spoke in a voice that was soft and steady and absolutely certain. Hey there, you're safe now. My name is Sadie. I got away once too, and I promise, I'm going to help you. The little girl looked at her with old soul eyes and a young face. Are you an angel? Sadie smiled, thinking of Colt, thinking of Meredith, thinking of all the children who had passed through these doors seeking safety and finding family. Something like that, she said. Something like that. Through the window, Colt watched the scene unfold, the next generation taking up the mantle, the legacy continuing. He thought of Meredith, of all the children who had been saved in her name. He thought of Sadie at 6 years old, barefoot and terrified, bursting through the iron horse doors with a courage that had changed everything. And he understood finally what his daughter had been trying to tell him all those years ago. Angels don't need wings. Sometimes they just have brave hearts and bare feet, and sometimes they ride motorcycles.